Shalom, shalom. Come on in. Welcome. Give me 1 second. Alrighty. Okay. Hopefully all is well with everybody. Thank you for your patience. We're getting set up. Those coming over from early rise Bible study session. Appreciate you. Excited about what the Most High has for us as a people, the people of Yah, as we come together properly and righteously. Okay, alrighty. I think, trying to make sure everybody can see and hear me all right. I think we got it. Got all the different angles, all the different places. All praise to the Most High. Thank you for being on with us. Appreciate you so very, very much. Alrighty. Thank you for those once again coming up from early rise Bible study session. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Prayerfully all is well. Prayerfully everybody's ready. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in the Kofi's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority to pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi. ¿Cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi. Ça va? Ni hao, namaste, Osayana Kituya, Ohio, I see you, Minut, Wagwan, Kasamida, Aloha, Ciao, Ensemble, Privet, Guten Tag, Habarigani, Aguaba, Madasin, Itasin, Jambo, Bimini Kofi, the Fra Kukatana, the Wewe, Boker To, Boker Tav, Boker Tav, greetings, grand risings, salutations, grand rising, good morning to you, Bakwata Tav, Barakala Chamikava, and Aiko Baiko, Khiritis of Christ, Mashalam Ki, Shalom, Akbarat, hello everybody, peace. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, between the voice of the voices and speaking the unspoken. Prayerfully, everybody is doing well on this rising. As we are coming out of this weekend where we were able to meet with quite a few persons in Detroit, we're excited, grateful, and thankful once again to meet many of you in person, to have everybody join us virtually, and of course to continue now back into our Exodus series as well. As a quick reminder, and thank you everybody who came over to was coming from our early rounds of Bible study session that we just had. So we will have our live session today. We'll have an evening session this evening. We'll have a live session in the rising tomorrow, but no evening session tomorrow. And then we'll have no session on Wednesday as I recoup a little bit and recover so that we can be ready for Q&A on Thursday and Friday. All right? So 2 sessions today outside of ERBS, or the rest of Bible study session. A live session and evening session today. Live session tomorrow. No session on Wednesday. Back on track on Thursday. All right? Including ministerial staff meeting on Thursday, women's meeting on Friday, and men's meeting on Saturday, amongst everything we normally and regularly do. All right? All praises to the Most High. Thank you again for being on. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to get into our word, and we're going to actually focus in on something real quick. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to have some of you guys pause real quick. Hold on 1 second. My apologies. I just realized I was supposed to have some stuff ready for my notes. We got a lot of information. I need to actually have my notes in place today. And I don't have my stuff prepared. My bad. Okay. All right. Give me a second. I'm trying to do this as fast as I can so we can get into this. I got everything, did all the stuff. and didn't print any of it. So I'm like to email it to myself so I can pull it up. My apologies once again. But we're going to get there. Okay. All right. One last part. Sorry. Okay. Almost there. Okay. Alrighty. Think we're about ready. Okay. All right. We should have everybody back. My apologies. Sorry. Let me know when you guys can hear me over here. I know you guys should be able to hear. Well, actually, I guess mic check for everybody. Mic check 1, 2. Can everybody hear? See me all right? Yes, no, maybe so. Let me know when you can hear me again. Por favor. Can you hear me over there? Did I get you back? Okay. My apologies. I had to. I messed up. I thought I had printed some stuff out. I did not, so I got to email it to myself so I can look at my notes and make sure that my notes are proper and that we're saying the correct thing. Because some of this stuff, I'm gonna be honest, I can't say off the dome. And the longest, as the so goes to saying, the shortest pencil is always longer than the longest memory. So at times it's best we just have stuff printed out, bare minimum, write it down so that we can recall it and have it ready for any type of teaching and retort if necessary as well. Alrighty. So let me see. Okay, cool. So we got our stuff. Looks like we're ready to go. Okay, all praises to the Most High. All right. My apologies. Cool. So let's get ready to say our Bible pledge, and we're going to jump right in. And we're going to kind of go over something that we went over yesterday, Exodus chapter 3. Tomorrow we'll get into Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. We went through Exodus chapter 3 in its entirety, but we kept seeing about this promised land. So today we're going to go over those groups of persons in the promised land and see what Yah is actually telling us, right, and what's going on. It's frozen. Are you saying it's frozen? Can everybody see and hear me? Yes. Sorry. Can you see and hear me? TikTok, can you hear and see? Can you hear me? TikTok, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. My apologies. All right. So let's go ahead and say shalom to everybody in peace. Once again, thank you for being on all the platforms. We give our honor and praise to the Most High. We give praise and honor to him. For my wife, Fiona Ma'ama, who doesn't like to say, to be honored. To the ministerial staff, moderators, SOC, Lottie Dottie, everybody, first time listening, long time listening, one of many listening, whatever the case might be. If you agree, disagree, whatever the case might be as well, we're thankful for you as long as you're, we're actually still grateful and thankful even if we have to block you and get rid of you. But hopefully, even if we disagree, we can disagree as human beings and be able to respect each other. We're going to get ready, or we're continuing in the Exodus series, and we're going to go ahead and get into what we talked about getting back into yesterday in Exodus chapter 3. So prayerfully everybody's ready to put on their thinking caps a little bit. This is going to be, it's not going to be line upon line, precept upon precept in what we're normally used to, but it will be historically accurate, which is the way that we're taught in school to be able to preach anyways. If you're talking about making sure that things get together in hermeneutics, it's also important sometimes that we be not only topical, but also sometimes historical and geographical in approach. And so that's what we intend to do today, to prayerfully be able to show you some things that maybe you don't get when you see how important it is that we know who we're going against in the land of Canaan, not only back then, but today as we're coming out of modern Canaan, modern Egypt, modern bondage, modern Misraim. As we're coming out of that, it's important that we have proper context of what we're going into today as well. Amen. But so we're going to get ready to say our Bible pledge, and we're going to get ready to get started. All praise to the Most High. We're going to go into our Bible pledge once again and get ready to get started. So if you're able to rise to your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word, we thank you for doing so, and thank you once again in advance for any likes, shares, subscriptions, hit the notification tab, Thank you in advance for anybody who gives donations as far as time, talent, effort, energy, does things in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, and yes, even including persons who give donations such as offering, tithe, tribute, things to help us to do what we do around the world. All praises to the Most High Yah. All right, so we're going to Exodus chapter 3. We're not really going to stay in this chapter the whole time, but we're going to Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to go and we're going to, read verse 8. Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. And if you are able, while you're rising to your feet, let's say shalom to everybody and get ready to jump right in. All right, so how's everybody doing? How you doing, Sister Sheila? How you doing, Cultural Prospect? How you doing, Brother Dwayne? How you doing, Brother Keith? How you doing, Holy Spirit Filled? Brother Darius, Sister Greta, Brother Rodney, Sister Beth, Minister Raj, Sister Mignon, big, Brother Thomas, Brother Darius, good always. Akut Devarach, got Lottie Dottie everybody, Minister Stephen, already. Sister Jennifer, Sister Deborah, LaTroy, Maria, Zebulon, 883-218-72753. Is that Isabella? Shalom. Peace. How you doing, Dr. Carter? How you doing, LJ Harris? Did it Taylor? User 939-63220-33216. Frank, Kai or Key, Rodunant, Pizzo, T-Mac, joined, Chris, Ashley, DJ A Bless. And anybody that I miss you, if I miss you, charge to my head, not to my heart. We appreciate you. How you doing, Sister Melissa, Matt Productions, Sister Shirley, Sister Taylor, Yasway, Sister Toya, Lottie Dottie, everybody. We appreciate your presence. Thanks for being on. And thank you so much, Dr. Carter, Tev to God, okay? Grand rising to you. Everybody, we appreciate you. And thank you so much again for being on. So we're going to get ready to get started. And hopefully everybody's ready for this word. We're thankful and grateful to have you all on with us again. We hope that this word is going to be something that be able to give you something that a so-called blessing. But we would say Barak or Baduk, depending on your dialect, or which way you are taught to speak. But we're thankful for another opportunity to stand in front of you all again. So thank you for being on with us. We appreciate you. We appreciate your heart. Once again, we're going to get ready to go to Exodus chapter 3 and verse 8 one more time. Last time I'm going to say it. If you are able to, rise to your feet in reverence of your His word, please do so. And please be ready to say our Bible pledge with us. If you can, put your Bible, your right hand, or your device in the air and just get ready to repeat after me. How you doing, double OG, triple OG? Appreciate your presence as always, big bro. All right. Here's our Bible pledge. Oh, excuse me. Almost messed up. Clean hands, sure. All right. Bible pledge goes as follows. This is my Bible. This is my sword. This will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible, and this is Yah's word. Hashem Yechava. Aman. Hashem, his name is authority, let it be done unto us. Exodus chapter 3, starting at verse 8. It reads as follows. It says, and I am come down, I being Yechava, I being the Most High. I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of those of Kemet, and to bring them up out of the land unto a Tabach land, and a large land, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, and this is our focal, this is where we focus again, where we get our theme for today, right? Unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Amen? Amen. All right, we've just read Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. May Yahweh Barak those who readeth, heareth, and follow, keep, and teach his most holy and righteous word. You may be seated or go back to what you're doing in the presence of the Most High. Yahweh Alacham. Amen. Amen. How you doing, fishers of man? All right, so for today, right, so we read through all of Exodus chapter 3. We focus in on the name of Yahweh, right? And that his name is a memorial. We went over his name, why it's important that we recognize his name, we realize his name, we say his name, and that as we even come back together, how important his name is. However, today my assignment is now, as I promised yesterday, to go back through these particular nations, right, that are mentioned in Canaan, and to be able to speak about what these nations mean, right, their importance, why it is that we learn about them as well. Because if we as a nation are going through similar things now, trying to come out from underneath those who are oppressing us, coming out of bondage, we must also recognize when we go through the wilderness, when we separate, when we learn how to worship, our goal is to eventually go into the promised land. So there's a transitional phase, right? We're coming out of bondage. We're recognizing that persons are being sent, that we have Moses in different ways, in different shapes and forms, being sent into our communities to ensure that we can now learn culture, make sure we follow the ways of Yah, make sure that we recognize how we were supposed to live and keep living, recognizes what things were not only commanded just by Mosaic law or even other laws, because remember, kingdom law is bigger than just only the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law was something that was the start of something for a people in the wilderness to make sure they were on track, but we still have anything a king decrees is law. So if the Most High is our king, we do not stop at um, Deuteronomy and say that we go no further and act like there's no law outside of that. We do not stop at whatever it is, but if it be the word of Yah, everything is law. The Bible, therefore, is mainly law and case study, right? So everything that we do as far as it being considered to be law. Come on? Okay. Now, how you doing, Sister Michelle? So everything we do is considered to be law. How you doing, Brother Thomas? So now we have a place where we get to where, right, we have this place where we are learning how to come out of bondage. We're having Moses sent. I'm not saying, you can say I'm in a Moses situation. I'm not saying I am Moses. I'm saying that we are having leadership that's coming into position, right, who's coming into the knowledge of who they are, have turned aside to see the bush that's burning, have taken off the things that they used to know, their shoes, and are standing on holy ground, right, becoming before Yah, being able to give you the message, right? To be able to give you the message the way it's supposed to be intended. That is bringing the elders together. We learned all this in Exodus chapter 3. Bringing the elders together and those who would know the older things that go back to our fathers and our forefathers, our fathers, because we can recognize things that were passed down. Hearing his name, hearing his authority, showing up before Pharaoh, telling them to let us go, to be able to worship how we should, and having Pharaoh, and being ready for Pharaoh to tell us no. And in this process, realize that Pharaoh, in telling us no, is going to set it up to where Yah's going to show himself to be so powerful and show us to be so much his nation of power that we will be not only released, but be released where we will be literally having our wives go and our mothers go and our grandmothers go up to persons and simply ask or request or right that they be able to receive things to take care of their families, and persons will give them to them as we as a nation walk out right with true leadership ready to go and everything coming together. However, there is a transitional phase that we're going through where we go through the wilderness. Once we separate, be ready, because once you separate, you still have to go through the process of learning what it is to not be in the world, right? And get yourself ready to go all the way into the kingdom. It took 40 years, right? We could have easily just went pretty much straight into the promise, but we couldn't go into the promise. Why? Because we had a mindset that was still connected to Kemet. And since we still were afraid and we still couldn't do what Yah said, only 2 out of 12 actually believed. It's like only 2 out of 12 believed that what Yah said was possible, even though Yah had shown himself to be over all things that we were going against. And so we could not accept the promise yet and had to go through 40-year cleansing of a whole generation so that nobody over the age of 60 could walk into the promised land, because we had so much stuff that was messed up that we had to get ourselves together. Right? And how you doing, brother Yachasaf? How you doing, brother Richard? Right? So, and all these things that we have going on, we had to prepare ourselves. How you doing, Sister Beck? To be able to go into the promised land. How you doing, Sister Donna? Right? So, as we get ready to go into the promised land and we're getting ready to go into the promise, and Moses is told that, hey, you're going to go into this land, and when you go into this land, I want you to know that you're going against these particular people in the land. Why would you mention the land of the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites and all this stuff. Why, right? Why are you mentioning all these persons? Well, because these are the persons, these are the peoples who occupy your promise. And that's our theme for today. These are the people who occupy our promise. Maybe you can say your promise if you want to make it personal. But these are the people who occupy this promise we've been given. Because you've been promised the land. Matter of fact, you've had a down payment on it. You've had a tribute towards it. You've had a tithe toward it. If you forget, the tithe that was towards it, the promise, right? It goes all the way back to Abraham, to Abraham, to Abraham, to Father Abraham. Father Abraham had already put a down payment. He already tithed. He already gave tribute. Is that true? Is that a true statement? He had already given tribute long ago to the high priest, Melchizedek, or as we say, Melchizedek. And he had already given tribute there. He had already given the tithe. He had gone and fought against, right, on behalf of his family, on behalf of Lot, right, had fought against those who would try and come and take his people. And then he took all the spoils, defeating the persons who were basically made it difficult for everybody in Canaan in his day. And so and when he takes that, he takes those spoils and could have just taken everything, but he said, no, I'm going to be obedient and I'm going to sow into the place where I live, and I'm going to sow into the place that I was able to do with Yah's help to rescue. I'm going to sow into the place where my nephew's going to reside. I'm going to sow into the place later on where my family's going to reside, and he gives a tithe. How you doing, Sister Shima? He gives a tribute. How you doing, Brother Darius, if I didn't say so already? He gives a tithe, he gives a tribute. And so he gives his tribute, he gives his tithe, and it's a down payment. And later on, the children of Israel will come back there. But when we come back there are persons who occupy the promise. If you recall from the Buttershot series last year, the Genesis series, if you don't know about Buttershot, its original term, there were times that Abraham dug wells, and Abraham made altars. And persons who wanted to take what Abraham had but could not, got upset when he was gone, and his son Isaac has to come back later on and has to dig up the wells that others have stopped up, and he has to go ahead and make clean, right, the altars that his father has made. Why? Because there are persons who do not want you to be able to have what Yah has for you, and so he has to go back there to the same enemies that his father had, and he has to reestablish the covenant that his father has, and he has to make sure that what's promised there, that he works to keep it clean and keep it something that's going on. You'll see this happen with Israel, right? You'll see this happen later on when we return, right? Where we know wells, right? Even in the biblical times, we know where wells are that our fathers have built. We know where altars are that our fathers have built, because it is important that we continue, right, the legacy of our fathers, as far as especially the worship of our fathers. It's extremely important that we do so. So in all the different things that we're speaking on today, right, we want to make sure that we know that there's a legacy, right? There's a promise, there's a heritage, there's something that's promised to you and I, but there's somebody who's trying to occupy your promise, right? So we're going to go over these persons who occupied the promise back then, because if we're coming out of bondage, just like we did back then, and even in Revelation, it teaches us a lot of stuff, not just only about looking at these things as far as how through the lens of Babylon, or through the lens of the Romans, or the Greeks, or the Persians, but also talks about looking through things through the lens of Kemet, of Mayasraim, or Misraim, as many of us know, as bondage of modern Egypt, if you will, but back then it would have actually been Kemet. If we're looking through the bondage that we went through with them and trying to come out of bondage, then also if we're going into the new land of Canaan, right, then we need to know about what happened with those that occupied the promise in the old land of Canaan. How you doing, Nick? Thanks for being part of the community, right? If we're talking about the new place we're going into, but it keeps telling us to look and refer back to what had happened before, then we need to know what happened in the former. So I bring to you a few things that might come across a little different. And shalom, Sister Beth. I think I said shalom earlier. Hopefully I did. But I'd like to be able to give you some notes, right? To look at some things a little bit different. Because there were different groups that occupied the place. And so we hear these names, but I'd like for you to kind of catch these names. So I'd like to be able to direct your attention to, first of all, those of Canaan, right? Or the Canaan, excuse me, or the Canaanites, as we know them today. Now, also, too, the interesting thing about, well, but let's go through. So we have some notes. So prayerfully, you guys are ready. Prayerfully, you guys can catch some of this stuff. I'd like to be able to present some things because if you're going to go into the promise, you have to know that you're going to a place that's occupied. Remember, Joshua and them, they went over and they kept the law, but they also were ready to keep the feast days, do all these things, but they also had to do these things to prepare themselves to go to battle. And as you get ready to go into Yah's promise, don't forget that there's somebody that occupies what he said is yours. There's somebody that's already trying to sit on and has been trying to sit on something that was promised all the way back to Abraham and say, hey, this belongs to us. There's already somebody trying to say that what you did doesn't belong to them. If I may, just real quick, this was actually somebody sent me a video today and it was spot on, Holy Spirit led, because it just goes and flows with what we're talking about. I won't go deep into this, but if I may, just keep it, let's keep it a buck as we always try to, right? It was a video talking about how, and by the way, it wasn't by a so-called black man, it was by a so-called white man, if you need to hear that, right? If you need to hear that. In the video, and what we're speaking on, right? Yes, all lives do matter, especially, or even the black ones. Great, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So, even when we were, even when I got the video was by a so-called white man, just in case somebody needs to be like, oh, it's fear mongering, this and that, and you guys are snowflake. No, it was none of that. But he was speaking on something very specific, where he was talking about how we hear this thing about that the dark ages happened, and the dark ages happened just simply because Rome went away, and that was it. And if you're not, and we just accept it because we're supposed to, right? That you're going to pass class, you're going to get that A on the test. You better say what teacher says, you know. And so you just, hey, the Dark Ages happened because Rome died off. When Rome died off, there was a power vacuum. That's it. And nobody ever looks into, like, for example, Attila the Hun. Nobody looks at, for example, Ivan the Terrible, which actually means Ivan the Great. Nobody talks about the Mongol Wars and how they could have eradicated Europe. Nobody talks about what was necessary to be able to pull them out of the depths. Nobody talks about what was done to those who were Celtish, to where a lot of stuff that's Celtic, sorry, I said Celtic, persons who are Celtic, there's a lot of their story, a lot of their history that's gone as well because of what was done. Nobody talks about the East Indian Trading Company or the Dutch Indian Trading Company, and what they did. Nobody talks about what the English did to the Irish, what the English did to the Scottish. Nobody speaks of what the Spanish and the Portuguese were doing to each other. Nobody talks about the hatred that was between the French and the French and the British. So much that the British who were fighting the British, you call them Americans now, but the British who were fighting the British sent Benjamin Franklin to go ahead and look at that stuff that the French had so much that the French went into bankruptcy to help America win. And then when America helped won, the French said, okay, we went into bankruptcy helping our enemy. And they said, yeah, rain check on that, we won't get back. See, there's a reason why there was a power vacuum. There's a reason why, and I'm going a little outside the video, but the video kind of got to this point where it was talking about there's a reason why there's this power vacuum. The power vacuum in Rome doesn't just happen. The power vacuum in Rome happens because Rome used to off people and ethnically cleanse, right? The power vacuum happens in Rome because England came through and wiped folk out and then R-worded, women for cultures that they did and told them it was okay to do so because, they need to make sure that their men were okay. So the king creates an edict, makes an edict and says, hey, it's okay to go ahead and do that to any women, right? They perfected what persons would call, well, a lot of persons don't want to call it, but we should if there's a such thing as black on black crime. What persons would call white on white crime was perfected. Right? It wasn't even perfected. I don't even like it when they say perfected. It was used. They put the foundations together so that later on when they took it to other levels as far as breeding other persons and cutting off their limbs but still telling them to work for them and doing things like that, they were working on this stuff. But see, you'll just be taught in school there was a power vacuum because Rome and there were the Dark Ages. But how were the Dark Ages? Well, during this time, we're literally in a place to where we come and conquer Europe. the Moors. And not only do the Moors do that, but the Moors get tired of seeing a whole bunch of stuff that you call dark ages, and they introduce technology like soap and water. But we have to say that no, it was something that was a power vacuum. See, Rome made all this stuff up. But what about the Etruscans and the Greeks that they learned from, who credit everything they learned from those who are in North Africa? Not the persons who are in North Africa today, but the persons of origin. Right? Hey, hello again, Isabella. How you doing? Right? So in all these different things, persons don't catch this. But I say all those things to say that if you're not careful, you'll not realize that there's a bunch of persons who will appropriate culture and will say that what belongs to a people, we learn in school wrong, and we don't learn until later on that we're still learning agenda and propaganda. So you'll learn things that are not even true. You'll learn things about each other, which causes us to even hate each other. That's not even true. And forget that we have an enemy who really is sitting there trying to occupy your promise. What's promised to us, right? What's promised to us is occupied, is something that somebody else occupies. You know what the Most High Yah has called you, the one whom we worship, the one who we say we follow in the Bible. He has promised us something, right? Hear this, beloved. He's promised us something, but in order for us to get it, we have to recognize there's somebody who's busy trying to tell you why they occupy what you already have a down payment on since the days of Abraham. Mm-hmm. And this must be a great message today because they're making sure we can't nobody get this message today. So we're gonna be on point. We're gonna be on point today. I can already see. So those who watch this, or those who catch this, or those who get this recorded, may this barak you, because this is gonna be something that's gonna barak your heart. See, we got to go deeper into the word. We got to go line upon line, precept upon precept in the righteous way. We got to go deeper into this thing. See, because there's somebody that occupies what belongs to you from the days of Abraham. There's a promise that's given to Abraham, and anybody who is a child of Abraham, there's a promise that belongs to you, but you got to ensure that you recognize somebody occupies that promise. And so when Israel is told, before Moses is sent back, he's given an assignment. He said, hey, I'm going to send you to go back to the elders, right? I'm gonna send you your brother. I'm gonna show you some signs to show persons I'm not playing. I'm gonna give you my name. I'm gonna tell you to go before Pharaoh. Pharaoh's gonna say no, that's okay. I'm going to win out, and I'm gonna show without a shadow of a doubt who I am, right? And so you just keep hanging in there. I've already won. Don't give up. I've already declared that you are victorious, right? I've already declared that you are victorious. You have problems getting into. Yeah, they make it's very strange, some of the stuff that's going on today, but that's okay, right? We're going to declare that we are victorious. He said, I already have land with your name on it. I'm going to take you out. I'm going to bring you out, and you won't be brought out empty. But I need you to recognize that I'm getting ready to bring you into the promise. There are some folk in there that occupy your promise. There are some persons in there. I promise you, there is a land that already flows with the milk and honey. I promise you, there's already a land that flows with the milk and honey. But I do need you to know that although there's a land that flows with the milk and honey, as it flows with milk and honey, there's somebody that lives there, and they're drinking the milk, right? And they're eating of the honey, right? That already belongs to you. I've declared it's yours, but you're going to have to be ready to go against these persons that are there. So who are the persons that are mentioned, right? So here we go. So once again, so these Canaanites, right? Right? Now later we would just call all of this Canaan. So now everybody just calls us all of this Canaan, and eventually all of this will become Israel. But right, who is promised to? It's promised to Israel, right? Israel, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the promise coming through Isaac, the promise then, between the two sons, Israel and Esau, going to Israel, Israel going to Judah, Judah going, et cetera, in the bloodline, but all of us coming out of the nation of Israel, 12 nations. And if you're grafted into the kingdom of heaven, if you're grafted into the nation of Israel, even according to Genesis 28, Israel is supposed to represent where heaven meets earth. So if you are in this nation of the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of Israel, you are the people of Yah, right? Which means you have to do what we do in the kingdom in order to be called part of the nation. Just like if you're born again from being Mexican and born again as an American, if you're born again from being in the world, you got to make sure that you do certain things to be recognized as a kingdom sovereign or a state citizen of the kingdom. Okay? Now, watch this. All praise to the Most High. So the Canaanites, right, is a general name. There are a group of persons specifically known as Canaanites, but it's actually a general name. So when you hear Canaanite, right? Canaanite is like saying Canaanite is like saying African, and not exactly as far as specifically specific, not exactly as far as specific geography, but if you will, right? If we were to say like this is to this, is this to this, well, Canaan is to the Hittites as Africa is to the Ghanaian. All right, Canaan is to the hit is to the Jebusite as Israel is to um, to Judah. Okay, so when we use this term Canaan, you must recognize that Canaan is way more. Even in the times of Abraham, when Abraham goes against those who are leading Canaan and forcing other persons to give tribute and tithe unto them, these it's argued 4 or 5 kings that are going back and forth and conquering everybody and eventually take Lot and his people. And that's why Abraham goes to go after Lot and them. So in order to free Lot and them, he has to go against all these persons, which shows how much power Abraham had back then, right? When they go even back then, there's 4 or 5 kings who are over all this land. So when you say Canaan, all these persons have to be freed. So when we talk about the land of Canaan, there's more than just what we consider Canaanites. Now we just say Canaanite, and we forget that there's other persons who make up Canaan. Just like somebody might say African, and forget there's all these other persons that make up all these. There's 3,000 bare minimum, 3,000 languages in Africa. Even before you get into dialect, even before you get into cultures, even before you get into kingdoms, etc. Right? Okay. So the Canaan is a general. Canaanite is a general term for persons in the land of Canaan. And there are many fertile valleys. There's many valleys there that you would be able to eat well from and plant vineyards in and be able to receive from. Okay. My apologies. Can you guys see and hear me? All right. We're having. I'm seeing that might be the reason why too. Maybe we're having a bad signal thing, but that shouldn't be the reason why persons can't catch us. Can you guys see and hear me all right now? I switched off from where I was and I switched to something else. Okay. It seems like it's trying to go in and out, in and out, in and out. I'm trying to use all this stuff I'm paying this money for. It doesn't work. All right. All praise. Okay. We have to figure this out. All righty. So, and all these different things that are there. He said, I realize I'm not an Israelite. Sure, in your eyes. But I actually know where I am or where I'm from. You know that the people that I'm from, especially on my mother's side, that even modern Israelis mention me as having to be persons who are considered to be Bet Israel, as far as where my people are from on that side, from West Africa and Ghana, right? That they actually represent, they say that the nation, the tribe that I'm from, actually has to be recognized. Do you know that? So therefore, since I have to be recognized as an, even by blood, and then if we want to get into E1, B1A, right? If we want to get into L2, L3, L4, yeah, I'm straight. If you even know what that stuff is. So, do you not recognize that? I mean, maybe you don't because you just simply are on some stuff that you haven't been taught, right? But you gotta get yourself in order. If you're gonna come on here with vicious lies and with ad hominem, then please make sure that you actually have something that's more worth my time, right? Because just coming at me and slinging whatever towards me doesn't really do much for me. Deuteronomy 22, 20, and 29 is not really Q&A day today. Maybe we can see what it's working with, but I have an assignment I kind of got to get through today. I'll look at it briefly. If I don't have time, to be honest, I don't want to skip over you, but just being honest, if I don't have time to go through it, I just don't have time today because we got to get through this assignment. We're in the midst of a series, but I will look it up very briefly because it kind of sounds familiar. I mean, I know Deuteronomy 22, 2, especially the end of it, but I'm trying to make sure that I have the right mindset of what you're talking about. Because if we're just doing the whole thing of like, oh, you shouldn't believe this because this, yeah, okay, yeah, we already got it there. This is like, okay, All right, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna get back on point. We have 2-3 minutes of fame, and you're not even gonna be worth the whole 2-3 minutes of fame because this is light work. You ready? All right. So here we go again. If a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that shall lay with her shall give the damsel father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. So first things first, if we're going to deal with the scripture, because you're basically trying to say this is somebody who forces himself upon a woman or R words a woman, since he R words her, as long as he pays for it, everything should be fine. Number one, this is something that's been changed, period. Right? If you actually look up your Bibles, even in English, and then go back to Latin, go back to Greek, and then go back to the original Hebrew, that's not even what it says. Now, the reason why it's been changed in English is because there's a lot of persons, just like they changed stuff about the slave Bible and stuff to be able to allow slavery, they also changed stuff like this so that, Englishmen could go around, they could go ahead and conquer persons and it'd be okay. If they go ahead and R word a woman and you can't do anything to them, right? That being said, though, if you want to go ahead and keep this where it is, number one, we know that this is not even the way that we roll because we have a whole situation that happened to where with Dinah, right? And she was forced against her will, right? Taken, and even if persons want to argue against that, although that's what it says in Jasher, right? But even if we want to argue against that, they didn't come properly as far as they were supposed to her father Israel, and so two of the brothers not only wiped out the man but wiped out a whole nation. Now that's not cool that they wiped out a whole nation. However, you don't come for our women like that, right? All right, number one. Right? Number two, if somebody does R word somebody or whatever like that, you know that like they can actually be held accountable off. Or and if somebody definitely does something that hurts or harms them on top of that, which they are, then they have to run away even outside of the camp and hope that they get to the camp in time before we take their life. Then once they get to the camp, we can start having conversations. And if the father, for whatever reason, we decide to go ahead and say, okay, like this is gonna work out or whatever, or if the woman, for whatever reason, would, now I'm not saying I would, but if so, then okay, there are ways that you should make sure that, hey, you recognize what's done. By the way, that's not just a thing of that, by the way, for our wording, that's talking about something we call a dowry. It's one of many ways that one can go ahead, whether a woman is R worded or not. But you're catching one thing, one verse, one scripture, and then saying that, hey, everybody has to be that or whatever. That is not the case at all. Once again, it's something that's even been changed, but most of you will not even look into that to see why did they change it, when did they change it, and was that something we initially did. Now, if I may also go here just to just quickly do a word. I'm already at my 2 minutes and 30 seconds place with you. But let's also do this as well because, you can look in your concordance as well. So let's go and look at the concordance real quick. Because if you just, even in modern Hebrew, this is not the original, by the way, this is modern. So this means they have changed it as well. But hey, let's just go ahead and do something real quick, right? If you look at this word that they're using, right, it says, once again, because people change these words, it says that he humbled her. But even in the modern Hebrew, that's not the word that they use. The word that you say is humbled in English says that he has oppressed her, he has afflicted her, he has forced her to bow down. It's recognized that what he did was wrong. So this is not the only thing that would need to take place. He would get the break speed off him more than likely. He might even get whipped, right? He had to run for his life, right? And then once he ran for his life, then that's the only reason he might live. And if out of all those things that happened, then we're going to have a conversation. Now that's if you read more than just only those two verses, and you actually read proper context, and you actually see what has happened. Yeah, we're not saying it's okay to R word women. There are some persons who have done so. And there are some things that like we can have say to the question like we need to ask like why. And also too, if somebody has gotten away with certain things, it doesn't mean that we say, okay, keep doing it. Hey, David, right, Solomon were out of pocket with the way that they had wives and did stuff with women. Right? But we were always supposed to be the husbands of one wife. Do we continue it? No. Right? Now this is something though in the law that is misconstrued and has been changed over time. Now take that as you will, right? But I've given you over 3 minutes of fame now. So I'm out of pocket myself. How you doing, Brother Counter? But yeah, that's light work. And if the whole thing that you were, when people put that up there, that's usually pretty easy because I'm not. Maybe I'm assuming, but usually when persons ask that question, it's pretty simple. I already know where you're going. Oh, well, the Bible says this, and it says this, and blah blah. It's like that's actually not what it says. That's not what it said as its origin. And we're going to make sure that if you're going to talk about it, who shall believe our report? See, that's why the person who was on here earlier had to deny that I'm an Israelite, even though I didn't even make that claim today, but he understands, therefore, that I must be talking about myself as an Israelite, and he has to defeat that claim, because then he can try and make up whatever he wants. But this is my report. This is our report. This is what we believe. This is what we've lived. This is what we've gone into. This is what we've done a whole bunch of stuff for years and years and years. Right? So that's the stuff you said. You said you never denied that. Cool. I was talking to somebody else. We have multiple platforms on today. Somebody was getting froggy, so I jumped. How you doing, Baron? And how you doing, babe? My wife is on the out of Bahama. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, and her website at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N. Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. So we have to recognize that. We have to know, once again, you got to know the word. You got to know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees, including other scribes who are going to try to tell you what you should see, right? But what they say is far, you see. But a true Pharisee, right? Because we act like all Pharisees were bad. But a true Pharisee or a true Levite actually goes by the word, does some research, and make sure we live by what it's supposed to be at the beginning. Right? So, back to what we're talking about. Back to what we're saying. Back to what the context is for today. Right? So, we're occupying, right? We're talking about what? There are persons who occupy your promise. And as you notice, somebody who sees that we're coming back into knowledge of ourselves and we're starting to get ready to go back to what's promised, you have to realize that there are persons who occupy. How you doing until daybreak? So all these different nations that are mentioned, we have to know what they mean, right? So now also too, when it talks about a Canaanite, Canaan, the land of Canaan, all this land of Canaan is going to become Israel, is known for city-states that are ruled by local kings. What might you call a city-state today that's ruled by local kings? Maybe not even kings, but what are some city-states, right? You wouldn't even call them city-states today, even though maybe you think of some of them as it. But, like a city-state, or maybe we can say a state. We have 50 states right now. By the way, a state is a country is a state. We can say a city-state is D.C., sure. Some people might think of New York City because it's a big state and it makes a lot of moves, and what they do affects everybody else. Somebody might say Atlanta, Georgia, a city-state, right? It has a certain ring to it. There's persons who make certain decisions from there, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody might say a city-state is Beverly Hills. A lot of stuff that's up there. It's a name that everybody knows, not only from just a television show, but from certain decisions that persons, are made by persons who live in that place. You might say a city-state is Dallas, right? You might say a city-state is, let's go outside. A city-state could be London, right? A city-state could be, something like that, where we look at a particular culture. But persons nowadays will look at the country. But back then, Canaan, right, which is the land of the original Israel, not even where all of Israel is today. All of Israel doesn't fit actually where all of the original Israel fit in geography, in historical geography. That being said, in this land of Canaan, you have several city-states. So when we talk about the next nations that are coming up, these are places that are within the cities that are within Canaan, right? So the same way, like we said earlier, somebody says Ghana, right? Ghana is a country in Africa. So if we talk about the Hittite is a city-state, or those of a city-state in Canaan, right? If we say we say Egypt. Egypt is in Africa. Kemet is in Africa, right? So it is in Africa. So you could say they are African. So the same way as the Jebusite is in Canaan. You could say the Jebusite is a Canaanite, right? But not every Canaanite is a Jebusite. The Jebusites are particular people in a particular city state. All right. So we have city states today. So when we go into places, that means that there are places who have rules, who are organized, who do not want you to occupy what is the promise that Yah has for you. Does that make sense? There's going to be a lot of line upon line, precept by precept, but just in a different way today. We're going to be more geographical today, and right in this topic. We're going to break down some things as far as history today in this topic. We're going to break down kingdom in this topic, but we need you to recognize what you're moving into. If you're going to go into the promise, there are persons who occupy your promise, and they're ready to come against you. Okay? If you're going to walk into the promise that Jehovah has for you, there are persons that are ready to walk into the promise, that occupy what it's time for us to walk into. Okay? In D.C., they're making laws all the time. Matter of fact, there are persons outside of D.C., but D.C. doesn't have any power outside of Congress, right? So there are congressmen who in Florida who are supposed to be us and are not. Literally, not even just talking about somebody else, but literally supposed to be so-called black persons who are telling persons that, hey, we need all black men in D.C. and young black boys, they need to be held to the highest extent of the law while they're young and be treated as if they're adults, even though that person himself, I don't know if it's Tim something or whatever his name is, that person himself, though, is literally somebody who's been caught who was caught dealing drugs and was given several opportunities to be able to have a second chance. But he said, no, your children, which are supposed to be his children too. But he's like, no, 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 your children, because he doesn't see himself as us, your children need to be locked up. That's somebody who sees a promise on us, who's been given, right? Who himself, he himself was given multiple opportunities, but will not allow you to go into the promise and become better and become healed, and does not want to see you be forgiven. Even though that's something that the Christian says that they believe in. How you doing, RFL Wellness, right? Doesn't the Christian talk about forgiveness? But hey, if somebody does something while they're young, even the person who's been forgiven, he's been assigned to be their watchdog, and as their watchdog, as their bootlicker, as their raccoon, if I may, yeah, he has decided to go ahead and say that it is better for his own people, right? At least some would think at one point they were his own people. But for his own people, his own brothers, his own little brothers, his own nephews, to say, hey, nephew, even though I got all these chances, you shouldn't. You know, that's the same thing as Thomas. Oh, no, no, no. What's the dude's name? The one so-called black man in the Supreme Court. What's his name again? I don't be recalling his name. I know we just talked about him several times in some of these live sessions within the last month. Whatever his name is. That's what happened to him too. Thomas, okay. That's what happened to him too. Clarence Thomas, that's what it is. Thank you. Right? That's what happened to him too. He he was pro he was pro Black Panther. He was pro Malcolm. He was pro Garveyite. He was pro Dr. King. He was going to school to learn how to preach to become like Dr. King and wanted to do things like Malcolm X and Dr. King. He wanted to be Dr. King Malcolm hybrid with a little sprinkle of Garvey on it. And then all of a sudden he went to Harvard. And when he went to Harvard, they got him in basically on the first DEI thing that Harvard was forced to do, because Harvard back then wasn't letting you in because of your skin. I'm in and out. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's the signal. I don't know. At some point I'm trying to learn how to use this thing that we bought, but you would think that it would work, but it takes several. I don't know. But my apologies. Hopefully you'll be able to hear and see me. But but all of a sudden he went to Harvard, and when he went to Harvard and they let him in on their, they were forced to do a DEI program. When he went to the DEI program at Harvard, all of a sudden, next thing you know, they say, next thing you know, they say, we have or when he gets out of Harvard, he starts looking for work. They start saying, oh, well, we can't allow, we don't want to take people that were DEI. And so he was so upset that he had to work hard to be able to be recognized, even in his genius, that he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure that this DEI thing goes away, because if it was hard for me, then I'm gonna make it hard for them. Rather than say, okay, fine, I'm gonna prove to them as the first one of some of these first DEIs, the first AA, the first affirmative action, whatever. I'm gonna prove to them as the first EEOC. I'm gonna prove to them that this stuff is gonna work and that they should allow more persons such as myself. But that's not what he did. He got upset. He said, if it doesn't work for me, it won't work for none of them. But you were ready to fight for all of us. What happened? See, that quickly, right? That quickly something can happen. Same thing. Right. So a lot of these brothers and sisters who be out here saying this stuff, usually they get upset and frustrated because they can't. They thought that the system was going to work for them, and it doesn't work for them. They thought they were going to use the system to bring everybody else in, rather than realizing the system doesn't work anyways. But hey, if that was your goal, well then try to use it and infiltrate it like you said. But no, 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 that's not their mindset now. They say, well, since it didn't work for me, I'm going to tear it down. That's what happened with Clarence Thomas. That's what happens with a lot of these brothers and sisters out here, right? So when we talk about coming in, so remember, whatever is the promise, you got to recognize you're going into something and be careful what you're getting into. Yah has promised us something, but you got to be careful about what you're moving into. So these Canaanites, they're ruled by local kings, these city states. Also Canaanites, they worship deities such as Baal and Asherah. Now Baal or Baal, and Asherah is more so like the Ishtar stuff, right? Now Baal used to be something that back in Abraham's day, they used to refer to the Most High in. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of them. Baal just simply meant Lord. But over time, Baal or Baal begins to mean you can be a Baal or Lord of the sea. You can begin to be a Baal or a Lord of the sky. You can begin to be a Baal or a Lord. You can be a Baal or a Lord um, of I don't know, of cattle, of whatever you see. You can be a lord or Baal of dust of the ground. Remember in Kemet they had a netcher of the ground, right? That's why he said strike the dust of the ground, and he took over that, right? So you can be a lord of everything else. So you have to be careful because in here there are persons who make lord. It's kind of like that term God, right? God or good in Germanic language actually means you can worship whatever you want. So that's why you always have to be careful when somebody says they worship God. You always have to ask what? Who? Who is your God? Tell me about your God. Somebody says, I worship the God of the Hebrews. Okay, cool. Tell me about the Hebrews. Right? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, it's all tangled up. I was just trying to make sure as long as it reached, I messed it up.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. But,
It's saying there's an obstruction.
oh, in the court?
No, that this it should
Oh,
that shouldn't be
okay.
whatever.
Yeah,
Like
that's where I had
you
it
think
before,
that would be enough?
but it might be. Thank you. So yeah, so you have to recognize that there's, that when people say that they worship God, they say I worship the same God you serve. Okay, if I know the Elohim I serve, then I don't worship gods. But if you were going to use these terms, you need to explain to me, right? You got to be careful. Persons get in relationship with others, and they be like, "Oh yeah, I worship God. You worship God. Be careful. Ask that brother. Hey, who you talking about? Ask that sister. Okay, what does your God say? And shalom, Sister Judith. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself. I don't know if y'all made it back yet. Happy belated born day once again to you. How you doing, Brother Alton? Thank you for being on, sir. Thank you for all that you do. All right. So you have to be careful with these terms. So the same thing was Baal or Baal. Baal or Baal was like their way of saying Lord or God, right? And this term eventually they start even using for men, start worshiping men and making idols out of men, right? Making icons, which become idols, out of men. So we have to be careful with this mindset. But that being said, this is a Canaanite thought process. So when you're going into what Yah has a promise for you, remember, as you go in there, there's going to be persons that say, hey, I worship Baal too. I worship the Lord too. I worship God too. I worship, Elohim too. Okay, you got to tell me because if you're a Mormon, and you say Elohim, you don't believe that Elohim is what I believe. Because a Mormon, right? Church of Latter-day Saints, right? A Mormon believes that Elohim is an alien that came from another place that has humanoid features, right? And that humans came out of Elohim. But Elohim, he was righteous and he did certain things the way that the Book of Mormon said you should. And so he did these things and it got him to be somebody who was allowed to become a god. And so Elohim became one of many gods. And they believe there's many, many gods that can be over things. And so Elohim stayed righteous. He was allowed, because he was righteous, to get all these women. Before you talk about the Muslim and talk about them having the 40 virgins, Elohim, their Elohim, not ours, had all these women that were turned in the spirit simply to serve his needs sexually. Yeah. So they say they worship Elohim, right? And they say that their Elohim made Jesus to be another God, right? So Jesus is the son of Elohim, but so is the devil. And they said that he loved them both equally, but they had a fight amongst themselves. But since the devil lost in their Mormon Jesus, because they don't follow Jesus, they said the Mormon Jesus, which is even different, more different than the Jesus that we say is not Yahshua. They say they follow the Mormon version of Jesus. So they said the Mormon Jesus is somebody who, when they looked at everything and put everything together, they recognized and realized that the Mormon Jesus was somebody who won the battle. And since he won the battle, all white persons, so-called white persons, come from his lineage, all right, and can be saved, all right, because they can be white and delightsome. all persons who fought with the devil, they lose the ability to have powers. So that's why they're fallen angels and stuff. That's where they really came from, right? They have no body, so they're his imps and stuff. And then they say the persons that are in between, the persons that were cowards that didn't fight, they say that they were made to be persons of color, or what we call black persons today. So you'll even have persons who are Mormons to this day that say, "Man, you know what? You're a nice person. You're a nice fellow. You know, you're a nice black guy. You're a nice woman. You're a nice black woman. But man, I wish you were white and delightsome." They'll tell you that. I wish you were white and delightsome. Because if you were white and delightsome, then you'd be able to get all the things that Elohim, their Elohim, wants for you. See, so when you go into the promise, you got to be careful. So you might go into the Mormon church thinking that the promise is for you there, but the promise is, even if the Mormon church is on land that Yah said might be for you, you got to recognize that that's not something that's for you. And you got to be ready to counteract that. How you doing, Ash Ash? I'm not sure. I moved it to the regular phone. I guess I can try it again. Hold on, you guys.
Sorry, I was kind of asking them.
Yeah, but they wouldn't know
Okay.
because even if it seems to be like I don't have it on the signal, I took it off.
Oh, okay.
But it's back on now. So I don't know. Is the signal better now on TikTok? I guess on, well, I can't say platforms out loud. On TikTok and over here, you guys should be fine. You guys over here that I'm pointing at, you should be fine. But is it better over here? Is it better on TikTok? Or did it get worse? Is it about the same? Is the signal better? About the same? Yes, no, maybe so? Can you hear me? It's all right? Okay. All right, well, great. Okay, we'll try to keep it. All right, we'll see. Thank you, man. So, where are we? I'm sorry, where are we at? So the Canaanites, yeah, so if you're going to somebody's territory, right, what Yah says is yours, recognize that this is what you're getting when you're going into the land of Canaan. How you doing, Dr. Carter? Was promised for you, right, in the land flowing with milk and honey, was promised for you in the kingdom of heaven, was promised for you in the land that he has for your forefathers, was promised for you, right? There's somebody who's trying to occupy the promise. There's somebody trying to occupy the promise. Be ready. There is somebody who's trying to come, and they're trying to what? Occupy the promise. Okay. All right. Next thing up. All praises to the Most High. The Canaanite also too, right? And by the way, you know what? Holy Spirit just said slow down a little bit. That Ishtar piece, that Ishatar, that Ishtar, that Easter piece. We can't just skip over that because, once again, persons would have you be in the Easter, right, than Passover. They'd rather be you into something that has you celebrating bunnies, right, and bunnies that have eggs because of Ishtar being the so-called goddess of fertility. That they'll rather have you do that than do what God says, even in the corporate world. Right? They'd rather have you do that than be obedient to the will of the Most High. So we have to recognize very quickly who Yah has called us to be and what he's called us to be, what season we're in and what persons are trying to get us to become. And I'm sorry, you all, I'm gonna have to move over just a little bit because the sun is starting to hit where we are, and if I'm not careful, these devices are gonna overheat. So if I may, just please give me about a minute, if you can. It will continue where we are. Just give me a minute. I'm gonna shift all of us over, okay? All right, so just give me about, hopefully no more than 60 seconds. I'm gonna shift over a little bit more so we can not get the sun on us. Mm. Oh, we got a little bit of something going on. Okay. All right. Sorry. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. I think we're pretty much back. I appreciate you. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, but if we in the sun too long, the devices will start to fry a little bit. So we gotta make sure we moved, or else it will not be a live session, let alone devices. Both of those, we can't accept. Thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. We're a little crooked over here, but hopefully y'all can see and hear me all right. I'm trying to make sure everybody can. Okay, all right. We're a little crooked, we're little whatever, but I think everybody should get the gist of what we're doing. Everybody can still see and hear me all right. If you can't, say so. I don't know how that works, but yeah. So all praise to the Most High. So we have to recognize and realize what's really going on as far as what the Most High has for we His people, and that once again, if He has a promise for us, there are persons who are trying to occupy the promise. So when it speaks of the Canaanite is one who tries to occupy the promise. Period. Right? When it speaks about the Canaanite in general, it's talking about persons trying to occupy, and we were honing in on Ishtar before I moved over Easter, because that's one of the biggest ones that's there. To where when we come into this, the persons who celebrate Ishtar, yeah, the weather's been very nice actually since we've been here. Right? Can't complain. It gets cool. We up off the Great Lakes, so it gets cool. But other than that, yeah, it's been very well. It's gone very well, right? But this thing of Ishtar, of Easter, of being in Yahweh's will, or trying to come outside of His will to celebrate the bunny, right? More than Christ, right? To celebrate the bunny more than Christ is something that's necessary, right? To celebrate the bunny more than Christ is something that has become a thing. To celebrate Ishtar, and once again, everybody swears by celebrating Easter that you're celebrating Christ, but nowhere is Easter something that you're supposed to celebrate in our Savad, in our scrolls, in our word. But persons don't believe our report; they rather believe the report of the enemy. As you get ready to go into what Yah has, I'm here to tell you, you're going to find more persons that want you to be in places that worship Easter. Matter of fact, anybody who worships Easter or Ishtar, be ready to say, you need to be ready to come against it. Real spill, right? That's a sign. That's a sign. I'm so glad that the Most High has made that very simple and has shown Himself to make that like a lot more simplistic, and to reveal that mystery very quickly, very easily for us. That there are many persons who want you and I to believe that it's all right to do things against the will of Yah. Easter, Ishtar has never been acceptable. It's never been biblical. Even in the English Bible, it is not written that you celebrate Easter. Period. Right? We know what Easter comes from. We know what Ishtar comes from. We know that it's not there. If somebody says, no, that's not what Easter means, and you're doing fine. Show me the etymology. Show me what Easter means. You won't find it as anything other than, right? Unless somebody's changed it, and they have to admit it, even in their etymology. How you doing, Shalalia? Shalalia? Right? We have to recognize it for what it is. Persons are outright, straight up, demonstratively lying and putting it right in our face, and then trying to tell us that we're crazy. That they say Happy Resurrection Sunday. Yeah, well, that's why they had to start changing it. Right? Even that is something that doesn't make sense, because even the Resurrection Sunday, and I'm not trying to come against you or your church, I'm just saying, right? This is just something I want to bring to our attention. If you think about it, what day do you celebrate Resurrection Sunday? Do you celebrate it on Passover, or do you celebrate it on Ishtar? Not coming against anybody, right? I think that's a much better way it shows that somebody's at least making an attempt to realize that we shouldn't call it something that has to do with pagan roots, right? With heathen roots. So I'm with you on that. I'm not even mad at that, right? Because at least somebody's making an effort and showing us there. But when we say happy resurrection, okay, we're in agreement. Okay, cool. But I'm just saying, I'm not even coming down on anybody. But hear what I'm saying. Happy Resurrection Day is just an attempt to say we're still going to celebrate Easter. We're just not going to use that name. Because if we wanted to celebrate the truth, all we got to do is celebrate Passover. What Christ celebrated, what Moses celebrated, right? What Judah celebrated, what David celebrated, what Solomon celebrated, what Paul celebrated, what John celebrated. Passover. It's not even that day. And if you and watch this, you get a bonus celebration because whether you don't have to do both, but there's a Passover on the 14th day of the first month of our year, and there's a Passover on the 14th day of the second month of our year. There's two. And the second one is basically a makeup Passover. If you couldn't make the first one, or if you wanted, or somebody can't make it and you want to intercede on their behalf, or if you just want to celebrate Passover a second time, go ahead and do so. It's that. It's right. Even Yehoshua celebrated. Come on, Christ celebrated. So if we are servants of Christ, why would we not celebrate what He told us to celebrate? He said, as often as you do this. And then we said, oh, so that meant we should never do it. Think about that, right? Whenever somebody has an Easter or Ishtar mindset, we know that that is a Negro that's out of his mind, or a Negro that's out of her mind. Just being honest, right? Like, hey, Christ said, as often as you do this in remembrance of me. However, what we're going to do is we're never going to do it again and say that we serve Him. How do you serve Him? And He said, as often as you do this. And then He said, do it even up until you get to heaven, because once you get to heaven, we're going to do it again. But they said, no. He meant communion. Where? Where did it tell us to celebrate communion? By only eating bread with oftentimes has leaven in it, and drinking cups of juice, little cups. Where does it say that? Have you ever read it in your Bible? Has your Messiah ever commanded it? Of course not. But somebody that comes into that Ishtar mindset, see, they occupy what belongs to you, and they're trying to hold on to it by any means necessary. They'll even start changing the word. Beware of those who have a form of Elohim, but deny the power thereof. Okay, DBM, yo, how you doing? Right? So, in all these different things, we have to recognize what's going on. Persons are saying these things and it doesn't make sense. How you doing, Hidden? It does not make sense. We know it doesn't make sense. We know that you can't follow Christ and say you follow Him. Then He gives you a directive and you say, I don't follow the direction. How you doing, Sister Erica? And thank you for the repost. Appreciate you. See, somebody's out of their mind. Somebody, or as our parents used to say, as our grandparents used to say, somebody's not in their right mind. On period, poop. Right? Somebody not in their right mind. Whose mind you have, I don't know, but it's not an Israelite mind. It's not a kingdom mind. It's not a Yehoshua mind. It's not a Yahweh mind. It's not a Zavach HaKodash mind. It's not let this mind be in you that also was in our Messiah. It cannot be if you don't confess Him as Lord, because in order to confess Him as Lord, the working definition is what? Do what He does, say what He says, say what He does, do what He says. And He's told you to go ahead and perform something different than Ishtar, but you'd rather worship her than worship Him. All right, next point about the Canaanites. We're pretty much ready to start getting ready and to go on some of this, right? If we talk about Canaanites, we also have to recognize that in Scripture, they are often represented. They also represent the broader population of the Promised Land. So once again, as I was saying earlier, this does not mean that there are not persons that we come across in the land of Canaan who do not agree with us. There's a remnant that's in them. Right? There are those who become part of us. This is what happens with Rahab, Lacham, and those who come out and they don't have to go down when the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. How you doing, Missy Tina Turner? Thanks for being with us. If you go back in Scripture, if you go back and look at what I'm speaking of, all praises to the Most High, and you look at Rahab's situation, Rahab, the harlot, the one that hid the spies in Jericho. After we got ourselves together, after we started reestablishing holy days, after we did what we were supposed to do, which was the will of Yah, we all of a sudden are about to go into Jericho. We're about to win in a place to where it was very formidable. Nobody had won, but Yah had already promised us because we had come back into his ways and we were obeying the law. It was already ours. All praises. It was time for us to inhabit the promise. But there are persons who occupied the promise. Before Yah got him up out of there and we won the battle, we there was a woman inside by the name of Rahab or Rahab, and she had a family, and she herself. See, this is why you have to be careful how you treat persons. See, she herself was in fact, yes, a prostitute. She, in fact, herself was somebody who was a woman of the night. She was somebody who, in fact, was not, somebody that we would say was following the law for sure. However, she had heard about Yah and heard about his deliverance of us, the people of Yah. She had heard these things. And because she had heard the truth, what did she do? She hid us, and then she said, hey, when you guys come to destroy this city, she said, make sure that you look out for us. She said, I know about basically the promise that goes back to Abraham. I've seen it, where anybody that comes against you, they're cursed. And anybody who presents themselves as towards you as you being righteous, they get the barak, they get the blessing. She said, remember me. She said, bring me back into remember. She said, make me a member. She said, when you guys come and the walls come tumbling down and everything seems like it's about to go down and everybody losing their mind, she said, do me a favor, please, and just keep me in your memory banks. Keep me and my family in your memory banks. Recall what I did, that I treated you well. See? How you doing, Brother Alex? And if we're not careful, a lot of persons will look down on persons, especially persons that are trying to come in, the persons that are trying to establish. No. There are persons who are trying to establish because they know that the promises are yea and amen. And if Yah gave promises upon his people, then he doesn't take them back just because somebody else wants to occupy the promise. So she recognized if Yah had promised the land unto us, that there might be persons that fight against us, but she said, I'm not fighting. She says, if anything, I need to become part of the nation. Come on, somebody. Right? So you need to know that when we go into the places, see, be careful about even some of our own brethren. I want you to believe that everybody must be destroyed and nobody can come in, and we need to lay waste to everybody, and we need to make everybody slaves, and we need to have women bound down to us, and we need to beware of those persons, right? Because those are the persons who don't comprehend that when we go into the promise, that Yah will use a Rahab. Be careful about that person that says that because somebody used to have a bad name in the street, that they can't be changed and that they can't do anything righteous because the reason we got in, at least the reason why the spies got out, is because of Rahab. That's why her family was remembered. See, be careful. I ain't doing F shit. Right? Be careful when persons say, oh, this brother, we know about him. He used to do blah, blah, whatever. Be careful when they say that he can't come into the kingdom and he can't be a reason why we're able to go ahead and do Yah's will, and that Yah can't use him if he's made up in his mind to attach himself to the promise. Just because he's occupying the promise doesn't mean he can't stay in, though. He got to become part of the nation, but it doesn't mean he can't occupy still. See, just because there's somebody occupying the promise, our promise, your promise, does not mean that they can't become part of us. It doesn't mean that they can't see the result of their wicked ways towards things and say, hey, I can change. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take time. See, once again, Rahab, it took until we got there. And by the way, how was she supposed to leave out? How she was supposed to vote? She doesn't know anything, but she keeps hearing. She keeps hearing and realizing that, hey, whoever they serve or whatever they're doing, everything else doesn't matter, right? Whoever they serve, it doesn't look. They went against Kemet. Right? It wasn't that long ago that we came out of Kemet. Joshua was around for Kemet. It ain't that long ago. Kemet was the world power. Kemet starts to go down. It's starting to shift over to Assyria. Right? In the wilderness, when they went around, anybody that came against us in the wilderness, they had to go down. So much so that they were trying to mess us up. Right? And Balak was trying to come up with the with Balaam doctrine with the help of the prophet Balaam, to be able to come up with anything that we could get and receive and think that was doctrine of Torah, that we might go ahead and mess around and think, oh, okay, cool, well, this is that, so we could be a stumbling block unto us. That's what we were running into in the wilderness, because persons understood that everywhere we went, we were taking them out, and they thought just in case they tried to take us out, we might want to come up with something that causes them to not believe in the one true Yah, since the one true Yahweh Elohim is tearing everybody up, except his people. See, Be careful. Rahab said, no. I see what it is. Right? Look, I'm going to take care of you. All I ask is that you take care of us. Because you guys live by a creed that says that if we take care of you, you take care of us. See, somebody wants to be in the word but doesn't want to do that. Shalom, Sister Tabitha, how you doing? Right? So everybody want to be in, but don't want to do that. Hey, if somebody takes care of us righteously, of course, not asking for us to do something crazy, but if they take care of us because it is the will of Yah, and they say, hey, Yah is looking after you, we're going to look after you, and we want to make sure that we do what's necessary, right? This is not a suck-up thing per se. This is somebody saying, no, I'm leaving this nation and I'm being born again into this nation. Mm-hmm. That's why you have laws on how to deal with the stranger. And it doesn't say kick them out. It says kick them out of Passover if they don't believe in Passover. It says there's certain holy day things they can't do. It says that we don't allow their ways, their foreign ways, to be things that are done in our society, especially if we're talking about specific things like, yo, you can't be having pork on the altar and stuff and crazy stuff like that. You can't be doing stuff that just jive disrespectful, right? You might have to get these fisticuffs. You might have to run them paws, right? You might have to get some of this stuff, some of this put them up action, right? But at the same time, it tells us that if somebody's coming from somewhere else and they're trying to be integrated and become one, have integrity and become an integral part of what we do, well then yeah, okay, cool, you got to work your way in, but once you do, you're part of us. That's what it says. Right? You can try to say whatever you want. You can try and work that into whatever. No. The Bible very clear. The Torah is very clear. The Apocrypha is very clear. That if somebody is living righteously, that's integrity. If they have integrity, and the word integrity means to become one with. It's integral. It's integrated. If they've integrated, this is why the United States Corporation, what you call the United States of America, has never been integrated. Because if you got integrated, then you would all be one. There would be no such thing as, oh, this belief and this belief. No, you'd have one belief. Right? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with your Constitution, even though we're talking about kingdom versus your Constitution. Our Constitution reads different. But that being said, in your Constitution, it says freedom of religion. Cool. Use that to protect your religion, all that stuff. What I'm telling you, though, is that if you actually were integrated, you wouldn't have multiple beliefs. You'd only have one. You don't want true integration. You said, should we not eat pork still? No, you shouldn't, according to Scripture. Matter of fact, what you'll find, and welcome is, it's easy. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. What you'll actually find is this. You'll find in Scripture that you'll have somebody who will basically try to manipulate, usually two scriptures. Maybe there's a third one, but they're usually going to try to manipulate two main ones to try and say it's okay to go against dietary laws. Both of them are taken out of context. Now, I believe I'm correct on the first one. I believe it's Matatayach, Yad, Matatayah Yad Che, or what we would call Matthew chapter 15. And in Matthew chapter 15, you'll discover that they'll say, Christ said, look, it doesn't matter what goes in a mouth that defiles a man, but it's that which comes out. But that's not, the context is not talking about what you're eating, and especially not talking about what you're eating as far as it being something that breaks dietary law. The context of that is that in Matthew chapter 15, Christ and his disciples are walking around and they're eating, right? They're plucking grain, I believe, to eat, but they're plucking something off and they're just eating it. There's a tradition, it's not law, but there's a tradition of their fathers, right? Of some of the Israelites' fathers. And so some of these Israelites who are elders, or even some of them who are priests, they come up to Christ and they say, hey, why is it that your disciples do not follow the traditions? They don't say the law, but the traditions of our fathers. You're right, which basically more than likely was washing your hands up to the elbow before you do any eating. But they're just plucking grain. They're not even doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with it, right? So Yehoshua says, okay, you're talking about the traditions of your fathers, but you do not even follow the law, which means Christ doesn't say the law is wrong. He actually says, stop telling me about the traditions of your fathers when you do not follow the law, which means the law is something that Christ says we should follow. Now, if you go further, he says that you don't follow the traditions of your fathers, you don't honor them. The Bible basically says honor your father and mother. And what he's speaking of specifically is that there was a law that they put, a man's law, not the law, but their own law that basically was like a kind of thing that was done. It wasn't even the law that most persons would have known about. It was secretive, right? And how you doing? Pray for Kofi. But basically, they were saying that the law that they had this thing that they did to where the priests, right, we're not allowed to have jobs. A priest a Levite's not supposed to work in the field, so they couldn't work in the. So what they would do to keep up money, because they weren't supposed to have money in their name, they weren't supposed to have money like on the books. They could put money in different ways to pass it down to family members and stuff, especially once they passed, or at least try to set up things to where these family members could walk into something from persons that they had already sold into that would take care of their family. But ultimately, Levites were not supposed to work in the field. Anything that they got, they received through assembly, through offering, stuff like that. And if a Levite did what they were supposed to, then they received. If not, if a man don't work, you don't eat. So if you ain't do what you're supposed to do as a Levite, why are we giving you anything, right? So what they would do though, they wanted to make sure they hid the money so they could always be out here rich, but talk about how poor they were simultaneously. So they would they made these accounts, kind of like offshore accounts almost. They made these accounts, but they would basically know about them within each other, and they would hide the money in the temple, which is definitely against the law, crazy, right? So they would hide the money in the temple, and they knew who had what in there, and they protected their funds. So let's say their mother and father came to them and said, hey, I need money, I need help, right? The law says honor your mother and father. So you can't be a priest and not, your parents need help, you got all this money laying around, help your parents, right? But they wouldn't do that. Instead, what they did is they hid the money. So if their mother and father came, they say, Mom, Dad, I don't have no money. I would help you, but I'm a Levite. I'm just getting by. I'm just scraping by. Meanwhile, they got all this money hidden in the temple in this offshore account. And how you doing, Dina? Thanks for being on. Thanks y'all for sharing the live. Thank you for your like, share, subscriptions, hit the notification tab. Even those who donate time, talent, effort, energy, and yes, even money to help us in what we do. Right? So they would do that, and so they got on Christ. And they got on Christ, and they said, why are your disciples not following the traditions of our fathers? They should wash their hands the way that our fathers wash them, and then they can eat. Christ said, you don't even obey the law because you don't honor your father and mother. They be out here struggling. They come to you for help, and you make sure that you do everything to lie and not honor them. He said, I peep game. He was talking about this. And then right after that, he would have thought he got him. He didn't stop there. He said he invited a whole bunch of persons over. When you read Matthew 15, you'll discover he basically says, hey, all y'all over there, come over here. I want to tell y'all something about these cats. Right, bold. And then he said, basically proceeded to say unto them, he said, man, these are lawless, don't listen to them. He said, it's not what goeth in a man that defile a man. So they were talking about them eating. He said, not what goes in it, but what comes out. Because out of the abundance of the heart, out of your passion, doth the mouth speak. So he was saying, they talking about what we eating, but the problem with them is that they don't even follow what they say, and in their heart they're wicked, they're wretched, they won't even take care of their own family. And it was so crazy that his disciples were like, yo, Christ, you might want to slow down. We might get you know what I'm saying? Like we might get jumped out here. But persons will try to turn that into you can eat whatever you want. That's not the context, is it? Not at all. Number two, the other one that they use is in the book of Acts. I don't recall the scripture, the chapter and verse. Somebody, if you would like to look it up and hold me accountable to it, but you would probably just Google it real quick, right? But if you go to the book of Acts, right, the Acts of the Apostles, and you ask them, and you read it, what you would discover is that Peter, now, who did have a problem sometimes with how he treated persons who were not Israelites. He would treat them one way when Israelites were around, and they would treat them different when Israelites weren't around. He got called out by Paul by that, right? Which was like, yo, like if you say that these persons are worthy, and Christ said they're worthy, to do what you're supposed to do. But that being said, Peter is walking around, and some of his boys, right, who are in the faith, get upset at him, and they're like, yo, I heard that you was hanging out with a Gentile. I heard you was preaching the word to them. What's up, my boy? Why are you doing that? How you doing, Jeannie? Jeannie, thanks for being part of the community. And so they start getting them. They like, what up with that? Like, why are you messing with them? Why are you preaching to them? I thought you rolled with us. I thought you was one of us. And Peter says, okay, slow your roll. Before you get upset, let me explain to you what happened. He said, I had this dream. Now, a person turned this into you can eat whatever you want. That's not how it happened. Watch the context. He says, I had this dream. I had this dream in which I was I saw a table come down. It wasn't a table really, it was tablecloth, but it took the shape of a table. And on top of the tablecloth that floated down, there was food on top of it, but it was food on there that was also stuff that is against our dietary law. And I refused to eat it. And when I refused to eat it, I heard the voice of our Messiah. I heard Yeshua voice. And he said, wilt thou call, unclean what I've made clean? Will you call unclean what I've made holy? But he was confused by this because he was like, but we don't eat, you didn't eat unholy food. Why would I eat unholy food? So then he said it happened 2 more times in the dream. He said, and in the dream, he never partook. So 3 times he was offered this food. He heard the voice of Christ say, why would you not eat what I say is clean, right? Or not even eat. That's not what it says. It says, will you call what I made clean, unclean? And he was like, I don't get it because I know I'm not supposed to eat this food. All of a sudden, he wakes up and he's still explaining the dream or what happens to his boys. He says, okay, so I woke up out the dream, and then somebody came to me and said, yo, there's this Gentile that want to hear the word from you. And he was right. He was like, I get it. I got to preach the word to them. So he goes and he preaches the word, and he said, and then when he preached the word, he explained to him, he was like, yo, I was preaching the word to him, and then he caught the Holy Spirit. Now, this is after Acts chapter 2 anyways, after Acts chapter 1 and 2, where we keep celebrating the day of Pentecost like we're supposed to on that particular day when Christ told them, go back to Jerusalem, celebrate the day of Pentecost, and the Holy Spirit will come upon you. Like I promised you, all of a sudden, he got the same, it already happened. But he's still having issues with it. But then he says, yo, I preached the word directly to the Gentile. And when I did, he got the Holy Spirit. And he's like, I understood what the dream meant now. I got it. That we can go ahead and stop calling them unclean if they want to come into the knowledge of Yahweh, or they're no longer a Gentile in the flesh, right? But now they can, right? They're giving up that and being born again, Israel, being part of the kingdom, being one, integrity, integral, right? So persons will manipulate that and only talk about will you call unclean what I've made clean, and they won't give you all that context. They'll just say Paul was offered food and he was told by Christ it's unclean. But if you read the whole context, you'll discover that's not what he was saying at all. He was saying, hey, preach the word and make sure they know the culture and the context and all these things so that they can get it as well. And so if somebody is hungry and thirsty, that those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they too can be filled. It's a different thing altogether. How you doing? And thanks for being part of the community, Jeannie. See, so once again, persons who occupy the promise right, that you're supposed to walk into are trying to change everything because they want to occupy it and tell you that you don't matter, that these laws don't matter, and they still want you to bow down to things that are not correct. No. If we're going into the promise, we have to recognize that what's for us is for us, and if we follow the law, the walls of Jericho come tumbling down because we honor the law, not because we disavow it. And how you doing, Cassie? And thank y'all for the love. Thank y'all for the repost. Appreciation. Right? You see that? So see how context changes that whole thing. Somebody will preach just a piece of something because they want to keep eating whatever they want. And so if you can eat whatever they want, they can eat whatever you want. So we'll change the word to be able to tell you why it's okay to do something that the word doesn't say. The word never said it was okay to eat pork. The word being Christ, even never said it. You said you've been wondering about that for the longest? Yeah, that's how they get us. But if we're going to, see, they occupy the promise. If the promise is for you, right, and you're supposed to receive the promise because of righteousness. It's like the faith. If I might just take a little break, we're still in the word, by the way. We're still going to get to these others. We're going to get to the Jebusites and the Hittites and all that in a second. But, right, and how you doing, Minister Elisha? Welcome. But if I may, just see, this is why it's important that we know law. Persons will keep telling us to be lawless. And how you doing, Valley, to be ready? They keep telling us to be lawless. Don't follow the law. Don't worry about that. But nobody ever tells you not to follow the law. And they said, well, Paul said this. Paul talks about, from the context that there's 2 laws. Paul says this. Paul says that the law of the spirit and the law of the flesh. Right? The law was always spiritual, manifested to the flesh. But what happens is for a lot of us, we want to put our flesh on the law or what our desires are on the law. And we start to change the law as something that we desire rather than what Yah says it is and what his desires are. So once we do that, the law that was spiritual now has become the law of sin, because the law of sin means that we have to change it into what our desires are. But if it be in its origin in the law of the spirit, for Elohim is a spirit, and they that worship him should worship him in spirit and in truth. So we keep it the way that it is, in spirit and in truth. And it is what it is. It remains what it is. How you doing, buddy? Welcome on. right? You see, so persons want us to be lawless. The Messiah told us that we should rejoice and be exceeding glad when persons lie on our name, right? Because they're lying on his name. When they come at us and they're mad at us because we do what the prophets did, we should rejoice and be exceeding glad. But somebody out there tells you that if you do what the prophets do, then you don't believe in the truth. But how can I not believe in the truth when the way, the truth, and the life told me that if I do what the prophets did, then I should rejoice? Because they did the same thing to the prophets. So if they did the same thing to the prophets who were under Elohim, then they're doing the same thing to me now, who is under Elohim, right? Then I should rejoice and be exceeding glad because I'm in the same position. And how you doing, Chocolate Monk? Shalom. How you doing, OKC? How you doing, Coop? Anybody coming in here? We appreciate you. Thank you for being on. See, we got to have honest dialogue. Somebody been lying. Somebody been lying. And if they say they believe in the Bible, and I say, okay, cool, you say you believe in the Bible, and I show you what the Bible says, and you say, well, that's cool and everything, but that's not what I believe, do you believe in it? That sounds weird, right? But let me say it again, just in case, right? If you tell me you believe in the Bible, and I say, all right, cool, but here's what the Bible says, and then you say, okay, that's cool, but I don't believe what the Bible says, do you believe in the Bible? How you doing, Olive Water? I don't care if you say the Bible says. If you don't do what it says, then you obviously don't believe in it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Right? Like, if you obviously don't. If the Bible says something, but you would not do what it says, and you can literally read it, and somebody can show it. They can even show you in its origin what it said. But you'll look at it and say, that's nice, but that's not what I'm going to do. Then Christ is not your Lord. And it's okay. He doesn't have to be, right? I mean, I wouldn't say it's okay, ultimately, but that's all right. I can't force Christ to be your Lord, nor would I try. That being said, if he's not your Lord, just say so. See, the redeemed of the Lord should say so, right? Those who are not redeemed by the Lord, or those who don't think you need the Lord to be redeemed, you should say so. Right? Stand on business. It only makes sense. Okay. All praises. Here we go again. Now we're back on track. See, so that's important. How you got to get this law together. You got to get this thing together. They want you to be out. See, your promise is occupied by somebody. You're going to have to, when you're walking into the promise, the persons who are trying their best to say the promise belongs to them, this is what you're going to have to deal with. Might I also add another quick verse for you too? Some of you might not have gotten this. I can't remember what verse it is. Is it Matthew chapter 13? Somewhere in the 40s, might be like verse 44, 45, somewhere around there, right? But Matthew chapter 13, which is where it keeps talking about the kingdom of heaven is like this, the kingdom of heaven like this. One time it declares that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who finds a treasure hidden in the field. And for the joy thereof, he sells everything he has to own the field. And a lot of persons get this out of context. You've heard a lot of scriptures and stuff, a lot of preaching about this. The man sold everything he had, right, because he found the treasure. But he didn't buy the treasure. The treasure was worth more than what he bought. He bought the field. He couldn't afford the treasure. And he couldn't afford to move the treasure away, because if he tried to take the treasure out of the field without ownership over the field, then guess what? He would have been stealing. He couldn't afford the treasure, but he could barely afford the field. He had to sell everything he had to ensure that he could get the field. But once he had the field, then he had the treasure. Once you have the treasure can afford everything that you lost. You can afford everything you lost. See, some of you would sell your soul hoping for pieces of treasure, for trinkets. But see, if you would sell everything, not sell your integrity, not sell yourself, not sell your soul, but sell all the things that you think need to be attached to you, then come into knowledge of what the treasure is. Once you have the field, the treasure is there. You can spend money on the treasure and fill the field up with whatever your heart's desire is. You can get back everything you lost and then some, but you need to make sure that you are not selling out or selling your soul. You need to make sure that you sell all these things that are auxiliary. All these things that are ancillary parts, right? That's what we're going after is the field. I'm sorry, did I freeze? Somebody said we froze. Did I freeze? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Yes, no, maybe so on TikTok. Can you hear me? Can you see me? It froze. Loud and clear? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. All right. No problem. Just want to make sure. So yeah. So the treasure. So the treasure. And thank y'all. So the treasure's in the field. Thank you, Ben. The treasure is in the field. But a lot of persons will try to get the treasure. But if you don't own the field and you try to take the treasure, you are a thief. The treasure, the kingdom of heaven belongs in the field. It doesn't go outside the field. It doesn't go outside the work. It doesn't go outside the kingdom. It doesn't go outside certain parameters. You're trying your best to take kingdom principles, to take treasure and drag it somewhere else, but it doesn't belong outside of there. You're a thief. You have to own where the treasure is. You have to go to the land that you're called to be in. You have to stand on the ground that you're told to stand on. You have to stand on the word. You have to stand in the way. You have to stand in the truth. You have to stand in the light. 10 toes down, not being affected by what everybody else has. And if you'll stand on business and stand where on the field and make sure you have ownership over what Yah has given you ownership over, he said inside of it is a treasure. The kingdom of heaven, that's what it's like. So what Yah has for us, the treasure is there. And he says, I've given you the land. See, on the land is the milk and honey. If you try to go in there by yourself and steal the milk and honey, you might get stolen, to say the least, right? But if you go in there and make sure that you take ownership of the land, well, then the milk and honey is yours until you decide to give up the land. As far as Yah said, he said the land is yours forever. And I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Althea? Althea, please forgive me. Welcome on, right? I forget how to pronounce that name. Please forgive me, right? But these are the things that we don't think of. Thank you for that. Thank you, Hidden. So we don't think about these things. We don't execute in this way, in this truth, and in this life. All right, next one up. Now let's start and go through. Let's get through these notes. So, right. So you got to recognize this and recognize that the Hittites, they controlled much of the land. Right. These Hittites, they controlled much of the land. So as they controlled much of the land, I'm sorry, the Canaanites rather, they controlled much of the land, right, that Israel was going to inherit. So their culture and their religion became a major temptation, right, after entering into the land. Because just because you enter in doesn't mean you don't have to cleanse out what's there. This is why a lot of these persons, it was said, utterly destroy them. Utterly destroy them. Y'all be thinking, Yah is mean. Yah is telling you the truth. Some of these things that are happening, some of these people, you got to utterly destroy. You coming into land, but you still trying to hold on into Easter. You got to utterly destroy Easter. Anything connecting you to it. You trying to come into righteousness, and here it is, Yah promises you the land, but then you bring in somebody that doesn't believe what you believe in with you, and here it is, now they're going to mess up what Yah gave you, and now you're going to end up losing it. You're going to end up being under somebody else's oppressive thumb. Here it is, you left oppression, now you're going to allow Assyria to come in. Here it is, you left oppression, now you're going to allow the Babylon to take over. Here it is, you left oppression, now here it is, you letting the Greeks and the Romans and the Persians in. Here it is, you left oppression, now you letting Christian nationalism in your house. Here it is, you left oppression, now it is you trying to go ahead and suck up to this one and that one. Here it is, you left oppression, now you're trying to do anything for, strange for some change. No, you left that. Leave it where it is. All praises, right? You left that, leave it where it is. Okay, so first up after that, and my notes are all over the place, my greatness. Right, my notes are all over the place, forgive me. So I gotta go, all right, here we go. So here we go, the Hittites. The Hittites are mentioned here. Who are the Hittites and what do they represent? Right, the Hittites, right, are originally connected with the powerful Hittite civilization, right, that was centered in Anatolia. We've talked about Anatolia before here. With that being said, if you don't recall, they're basically in Turkey. So those that are Turkish, original Turkish, right, there's been some movement. Those who would have been Turkey, who also at one point became the Ottoman Empire and all this stuff, and we're going back though to the times of Moses. That's because that's where we are. We're going back to the time of Moses. The Hittites are basically Anatolia. If you recall, Anatolia is connected. Even the spirit of what happened with Anatolia and stuff still reigns true, even in Revelation when we start talking about the seven assemblies. So that's how powerful this spirit of this Anatolia or the Hittites are, where they still are being spoken of. The spirit of what they do is still what affect the seven assemblies, the Pergamon dynasty, even in the times of Revelation. And thank you, moderators. I didn't catch what they said. Kel, thanks for being on. Thanks for leaving. right? Or thanks for listening if you're listening, but you're not gonna be able to put put anything else in here, right? So these are the Hittites, right? Modern Anatolia, okay? In Moses' day, the Hittite group, there were groups that had settlements in Canaan. So not as powerful as they would have, especially getting to stuff that they start to flow through and start to trade and stuff like that that lead eventually through Rome and then later on Ottoman Empire and all that. But they're starting to settle. They have settlements in places in Canaan, right? And they're often in hill countries. They're often in high places. Wickedness in high places. So they're often in high places. They're often in hill countries. So they're in places where it's difficult to deal with. If you go through certain valleys, you got to realize that they can go ahead and they can try to take from you. Or if you go into hill countries, they're usually in places where it's an uphill battle to climb. So if you're going to fight these persons off, you got to realize that you got quite a battle to go. You're going to need a strategy. You're going to need to be able to have some armor. You're going to need to be able to do something. See, once again, the persons who occupy the promise, you got to be ready for this. They were established already, right? And as Israel came in, we had to encounter, right, and eventually possess what these people had. But we had to encounter them in order to possess the promise. Are you ready to encounter? See, you're going to come into encounters with persons who are anti-kingdom, who are anti-Christ, who are anti-word, all right? But the promise of the word is still for you. Are you ready to encounter them, but still but be ready to battle and claim what belongs to you? Are you ready? Come on, somebody. Are we ready for this? See, we talk a great game, but are you ready for the encounter? We talk a great game, but are we ready for the encounter? Right? Are we ready? You're going to encounter persons who are in the promise, right? They're in a position to try to keep you out. And yeah, it might be an uphill battle, but Yah is with you. And if Yah is with you, if Yah is in you, then it'd be more than the world against you. Right? There's somebody who's ready to say why your marriage will not work. You're going to encounter that. Matter of fact, sometimes your spouse, you might feel like that's the reason why your marriage will not work. It's an encounter. But Yah said, just because you encounter, right? Just because you encounter them, it doesn't mean that you will not eventually possess what I said. Mm-hmm. Right? Encountering evil does not mean that you shall not possess righteousness. Encountering evil just means that evil must be defeated. You see that? All right. So when you talk about the Hittites are difficult. They're in high places, right? They have settlements, which means that they're not quite established the way that they will be eventually. But they have settlements. You're going to deal with them, and they're more settled there than you are. But the promise that they're trying to settle into is the promise that goes back to your father Abraham. All righty. Hold on 1 second. Okay, the Amorites up next. The Amorites. Who are the Amorites? The Amorites were actually one of the most powerful groups in Canaan. If you talk about Canaanites, it doesn't. It's pretty difficult to say that anybody was more powerful than the Amorites. Right? There are persons that'll argue it, but they were up. They were up there. The Amorites occupied territory east and west of the Jordan. So if you go on the map and you find out about the River Jordan, you'll discover that they were on the east side and the west side, right? And they were around the river. Now that's something that you're going to occupy, right? They're occupying, but they're occupying the promise. Now, what's important about a river? Why would you want to be in a civilization where you're around a river? Right? Because water is life. Uh-huh. Right? Water is life. If you can get to the water, right? The water is just about everything you need. If you can get somebody some water and you can make sure that you can put something to be over your head, you're probably gonna do all right. Right? If you can get water, right, you can have plumbing. If you can get water, you can have hydration. If you can get water, you can clean wounds. Right? If you can get water, you can boil some stuff. Right? If you get water, right, the list goes on and on. Your body is made out of water. right? If you can get water, that's right. You can have water for your animals. If you get the water, there's a whole lot, right? So they have water. It's important to catch that. It might be a small thing, but they were on the east and the west of the River Jordan. This means that they were on both sides. That means that they were center. The center of them was the water. Now, in the spirit, right, water can represent people, but also water can represent spirit. Water can represent people, a nation, but also water can represent spirit. So there are persons who are trying to be in a position to where they can use spiritual things for their disposal and be as far on the east and the west of it. But Yah said that belongs to you. Yah says that belongs to you. It belongs to you. There's water. There's a place where your civilization can thrive. There's a place that should be central to the mind and the hearts of Yahweh's people. The water is right there. It's for the taking. It's yours. Right? The water's right there. Right? Right? But once again, we got up to the land of Canaan, and Yah sent in spies, and the spies came out and said, "Oh, we're like grasshoppers in their eyes." Who cares if these were true giants and we were actually like grasshoppers in their eyes? If Yah said the water is yours, then get what he said is yours. Something central to your civilization is worth fighting for. Does that make sense? Something central to your civilization is worth fighting for. It is worth fighting for. Oh my greatness, I'm trying to help somebody. There's certain things that you should have been fighting for, but everybody keeps telling you not to fight for, and so we're not fighting for. But there's certain things in your civilization that are worth fighting for. There are certain things you've been giving up that Yah says is for you to drink. It's worth fighting for. There's a well that he had dug up, and here you are coming and not realizing the Messiah is there, and he asked for you to get him water, and you're so busy saying, "Why are you asking me to get the water?" Not realizing who he is, because if you had realized who he was, you would have asked him for water, and he would have given you water that would have filled you up eternally, that you would never thirst again. Right? The woman at the well, there's water that's right there. But we don't know who he is. Now that we're coming into the knowledge of him, though, and we're filled up, we should go and preach the word so that thousands would come into the truth. And how you doing, Linda? Hello, shalom to you. How you doing, true son? Right? You see what I'm saying? Like we have access to water. Whenever you see that there was water somewhere in the Bible, whenever you see there's water somewhere in ancient times, you need to know. You need to be aware of that water, all praises to the Most High. When you see that water is there, that's where civilization is trying to go. The Nile River, why is it so important? Because civilization can be off there. The Mississippi River, why is it so important? Because civilization can live off there. The Amazon River, why is it so important? Because civilization, everybody says, no, it's not. That's one of the most dangerous places to live. There's a bunch of civilization there still, but if you even go and research, what you'll discover is basically disease, right? That was thrown often on the people of there, were the thing that went away. But these persons actually literally had technology back then where they created soil, and they could take the soil and put the soil, right? They could actually take dead soil and put some of their living soil together and make that soil live. And they lived off the Amazon River, and they actually created. They had lands and peoples and civilization. They had to be dug up, of course, but now they've been looking over there. All that stuff was possessed by people over and over again. They lived off the river. Where the river is life. Where the water is life. Where the spirit is life. And we've been promised, go there. That's where the promise is. And we said, no. Now, I would go there, but I would do it, but, I would hear y'all, but no, go to where the water is. Go to where the promise is. He's promised us. Somebody's occupying the promise. They're trying to tell you, no, this is this, and this is how it is. We're Hittite. I'm sorry. We're Amorite over here. Right? These are the same persons we're warned about in Revelation. And thank you for sharing the lie. I appreciate you. These are the same persons we're warned about in Revelation. The same. We're told specifically, hey man, watch out for these persons. Watch out for these Anatolians. Watch out for the Turkish persons. Watch out for these persons who are Eastern Rome. The same region, same spirits. Even if it be different people coming through there, same spirits. How you doing, Carpenter? Welcome. Right? Same spirit we're dealing with. We're told, hey, be careful about these embers. When you come into the promise, this is what you're dealing with. Be ready. These persons occupy the promise and are trying to tell you that what they believe and what they occupy, or what they've used to occupy, is more important than what the Most High has spoken. All right? Be ready when you come into what the Most High Yah says is yours. Okay, next one up. Sorry, excuse me. Next one up. Forgive me. My notes are all over the place. I don't know how they got like this, but that's okay. The parasites. The parasites. Also mentioned. The parasites. Now, for real, there's arguments over who they are. I don't think anybody really can tell you their exact origins. We kind of don't know who they originally were. We know they're Canaanites, but we don't really know who they originally were. All right? But the parasites. So little's known about where they come from as far as their origin, right? They may have lived in unwalled villages throughout the countryside. So they didn't have walls posted up. So where we see like the walls of Jericho, that's more than likely not anybody, although they might have had a couple parasites in there, that's probably more than likely not a parasite group, right? But they lived throughout the countryside. And more than likely, their name means that they are like either rural or village dwellers. Okay? So they had little villages. What's the importance of them? The importance of them ultimately is they are persons who occupy the land that's promised to Abraham's descendants. So even if we don't know much about them, we know they occupy the land. They would have been persons that we would have had to fight against. Now watch this though. Sometimes as much as your enemy might occupy what's been promised to you, how you doing, the new Malcolm? They're trying to keep the promise away from you. I guarantee you this, if nothing else, that these persons who dwell in your land, they're unwalled. This is something we can look at to be able to say they're not as protected as you might think. And some of us won't move with what Yah says because we're so worried about this, that, whatever, not realizing that, hey, these persons who we're worried about, they're not even as protected. First of all, you're more protected than everybody because you got Yah. Well, Juan, Audrey, how you doing? Right? You got the Most High Yah living inside of you. That being said, right? That being said, even as much as you think somebody else is protected, they're never more protected than you. But as much as you think they're protected, they have already lost. They don't even have protection. They don't have the chitz. You have the chitz. You have the hedge of protection. They don't even have the hedge of protection, but you're worried about it. Because one of the spies, and this is, can we just put a pin in this real quick? And thank y'all for the love. Can we just put a little pin in this real quick? Look, we just gonna put a little pin in this. If we be honest, if we keep it a bucket, we keep it real. You had spies going to the camp. You had spies going to the camp. Right? Yah asked Moses, asked Moses, said, Moses, send some spies into the camp. Send some spies in there. I want you to have some person that know how to blend in, read, look at stuff or whatever, not to try and take over, but to see what's necessary for you all to be able to go in and take and allow the kingdom to reside by itself. Right? 2 out of the 12 come back with righteous reports. Everybody else says, yeah, everything that Yah said is true. But we still doubt the last part of what Yah said, which is the land belongs to us. Look at that. Everything that Yah said is true. We know that He's saved us. We know He's delivered us. We know that He's had us walk on dry land. We know He's had walls of water stand up so we can walk across, or however He did it. We really don't know exactly, but we kind of look at the movies, right? We know that we walked across on dry land, across the Sea of Reeds. We know that He's been able to feed us when it's rained down manna from heaven. We know that He's been able to give us quail. We know that He could bring water out of a rock. We know that he's been able to give us the tablets and be able to write with his own hand and transfer the things from the spirit into the physical. We know that he's given us a leader in Moses, who has kept his word and kept the faith. We know that he's kept the promises to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. We know that he's even revealed his name to us recently. We know all these different things. But hey, we know that he said there's a land flowing with milk and honey. That's true. We know that, hey, there's place for our cattle. We know that there's places where we can really do some things as far as planting food. We know all these things to be true. But when he says he'll be with us and we've already won, we don't believe that. 10 out of the 12. If you break that down further, that's what, 5 out of 6? 5 out of 6, I believe it's 83 point something percent. So 83 to 84% said that, hey, everything he said is true. I'm going to just round it up to 84. I don't know what it is. I'm going to just say 84%. 84% of persons that were sent out said everything that y'all said is true. However, we don't believe that he'll be with us. Look at that. Look at that. Look. 84% said everything that y'all said is true, but we still don't believe. We've been around to see him do everything that he said he would do. We know what he's done for our fathers. We know that he created all. We know that he defeated Pharaoh. We know that he got us away from Balaam doctrine and Balak. We know that he got us away from the Amalekites. We know that we've been able to utterly destroy our enemies who come against us. But we know that he's fed us and given us water where there shouldn't be any ability to have it, especially for millions upon millions of us walking through. But we don't believe we can go in. That's right. How can you not believe all those things he did? And we can't believe that? All the things he's done in your life, and you can't believe that he still walks with you? All the times that you didn't have money for food and he came through anyway. You don't have all the times that you were looking for the truth and he provided truth and you don't know. You believe everything he's done. He's been faithful in everything. You survived 100% of everything you've been through, but you don't think you can survive this. The Bible says that he was allowing you to breathe and watching over you and let rains on the just and the unjust alike. Now that you're justified by faith, you're not going to work and walk in it. These persons are occupying the land that belongs to you. They're not even protected. They're unwalled. Here you are, not only been protected, but everywhere that you foot is belonged to the Most High, and he said it belongs to you because you're his child, and yet you won't walk into it like that. 84% of them jokers said, we believe everything that Yah said. Everything he said is true. We synced it. We have seen it for our own eyes. However, we don't believe that he'll keep us. 16%, 2 out of the 12, 1 out of the 6, said, we've seen it and we believe it because Yah said it. See, they're the reverse. They said, even if we hadn't seen it, because Yah said it, it's already so. So when we saw it verified what he said, because we believe what he said even before we see it. And by the way, before somebody says that's blind, you're trying to get people to just leave blind, just follow blind. You don't want a person to think for themselves. No. They've literally seen Moses stretch out his staff and then walk on dry land. They've literally seen themselves be led by a pillar of fire by day and a pillar of cloud by night. No. See, it's not just, no. They've seen that it started, that the water turned into blood, right? Matter of fact, if you read when it happened in Exodus chapter 4, which we'll get into tomorrow, it says that when Moses picked the water up and then he put it on the ground, when it hit the ground, it turned into blood, right? They've seen Moses' hand go in and come out leprous and go back in and come out and be healed. They've seen, right, that the frogs jumped out of the water. They saw that the livestock began to, that the dust began to turn to, insects, and that it rained down hailfire, and that the cattle began to die, and that the Most High, after the third around the third plague, starts putting distinction that all the plagues only happened on the Kemetic side, but never happened on the side of Goshen. That the slaves are living better lives, and the persons of Kemet are trying to hold on to them, but are so plagued that they can't even hold on to the slaves. They had to let him go. They've seen that the Pharaoh could speak death over their firstborn, over what breaks out of the matrix, right? The firstborn to come out of the womb, right? What breaks out the matrix, the firstborn. And they said they've seen that the Pharaoh would speak that over us and that it would happen to his people. They've seen it. See, so they're not saying, oh, we're blindly doing nothing, right? There's a faith, there's a level. The Thomas, see, we talk about doubting Thomas. Thomas wasn't a bad guy, ultimately, because Thomas said, hey, I got to see it to believe it. Yeah, Yahashua said, no problem. Hey, Thomas, I'm here. Put your hands in the holes in my hand. Put your hands in my side. You see it now? And what Thomas said, you are my Lord and my God. What that refers to is actually you are Adam, you are my Lord, Yahashua, you are the Messiah, and you are Elohim. Which, by the way, I don't know why we don't ever talk about the fact that Thomas literally called him Lord and Elohim. He called Christ Lord and Elohim. He called who? Christ Lord and Elohim, which means he's one with the Father. He is Lord and Elohim, and Christ did not deny it. He said, it's great that you know me by that, Thomas. He said, I'm excited now, Thomas, for you. But he said, for real, I'd be really excited because greater is when Christians don't have to see it to believe it. So look, Thomas, you walk with me all this time. Remember, Thomas said, show us the Father. He said, how long have I been with you and you don't know the Father? If you've seen the Father's me and I'm the Father. Then Philip was even worse than Thomas. Doubting Philip, we talk about doubting Thomas. Doubting Philip said, again, show us the Father. And he said, I just told you who I was. I've been with you all this time. You seeing all this stuff happen and you don't know who the Messiah is? You don't recognize me for who I am? That's why eventually he would ask his own disciples. He would say, hey, who do men say that I am? And they began to list out. They could do it when who does man say? See, so they were like, man says, man says that you John. Some say you John the Baptist, and some say you Elijah come back, and some say you this, and some say you that. And then he said, okay, now who do you? You walk with me, you talk with me, you're supposed to know me. Who do you say that I am? And everybody got quiet. Finally, Holy Spirit comes upon Salas or Peter, and Peter says, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah. You are Mashiach, you are Mashiach. And he says, hey, absolutely correct. Holy Spirit has revealed it unto you. Even though later on, that same Peter would then have to be rebuked because the devil was trying to get up on him. And Christ would say, get behind me, adversary. Get behind me, Atzatan. To the same person who saw through Holy Spirit that he was the Messiah. But all these persons walked with him and could not see him for who he was. They could tell you what man said he was, but they couldn't see who the Most High said he was. And if they knew who the Most High said he was, they would realize they were walking with the Most High manifested in the flesh. How you doing? Peace and blessings. So you got to realize that somebody is occupying where the promise is. And these persons are living by a different thing. And you're going to have to deal with this. They're occupying the land promised unto you. They're occupying the land that's unto you. And you're going to have to know enough about the word that when these persons say strange things or do strange things, you're going to have to know enough to not be dealing with this or be stuck in what they're trying to get you to occupy because they don't like the fact that you are trying to occupy what's promised to you. See, persons will see you but not even know who you are. So those who follow, those 2 spies, those 1 out of 6, those 2 out of 12, that's 16%. I'm just rounding, we rounded down because we rounded up the other way. But those 16%, if you will, right? So 16% might be the persons who say that we don't have to see it to believe it because we've seen enough. Anybody, right? I'm not saying that you should never challenge or study. If you want to study every single thing that everybody tells you, for sure. But after a while, look, there's some persons who have known me for 20 years. There's some of you who know me for 10. There's some of you, believe it or not, right, on social media, some of you have known me since 2013. Some of y'all have known, or 2014, so when I started coming on, even though it was barely anybody who cared. But they're right, it's not because you didn't care, but you just didn't know who I was, right? There's some of you who've known me since 2018, 2019. I was talking with some persons to get today, and I was like, yes, we had a day one, big brother Tommy. We were talking, I was like, yeah, you were day one. I was like, you might had been around in 2018, 2019 when on TikTok I wasn't really doing nothing. But either way, wherever you come in, right, is what I'm saying is if you know me and you know me long enough and you get to know me and we get to have even conversations, you just hear what I preach and you get to see what it is that I live and you see how the community operates, you see how we operate. After a while, if I say something just out of relationship, you'll get to catch on and say, yeah, I'm definitely believe that. Doesn't mean you should never study to show thyself approved. But every once in a while, you would think some of the stuff that I say, I don't have to be everything, but every once in a while, I should be able to say something. And you say, because I've seen enough that I believe at least that. Almost a year, all praises, 5 for you. Okay, right? So even if you're barely, right? So even if, right? So if you've known me, if you're somebody who's known me for 15 years, you would think I should be able to say something and every once in a while. You know what I'm saying? If you know me for 30 years, even more so. If you know me for 3, might not believe me about a bunch of stuff, but my actions, my works should back up what I say. Here it is. You got 84% of the spies. 84% of who y'all says, hey, go get the not. Look, the spies were not supposed to spy on them to give them information as much as the spies were just supposed to go and say, hey, everything y'all said is true. And they did say that, except for the last bit. They said everything he said is true. All the milk is there, the honey is there, the fertile lands are there. But they said our enemies are there too. But he had already promised before he sent Moses to kill him. When y'all went to Pharaoh the first time, he had already told y'all the deal that you were going to be free and you were going to go to this place. And the same way he dismantled Pharaoh, who was the king of the world power, he was going to dismantle Canaan. Matter of fact, if you want to go really in depth, thank you for the love. If you want to go really, really in depth, and I think I said shut up earlier, Sister Deborah, if I didn't, please forgive me, right? If you want to go really, 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 really far in depth, this goes back past when Abraham made the tithe. This goes back to the curse, right? Or right, that was already put not upon him, Ham, but upon his son, Canaan. When Ham saw Noah uncovered and went and tried to tell his brothers so they would laugh at him, his brothers went inside and went backwards with the towels and covered him up. Noah could see it, but he couldn't move because Noah was so drunk that he couldn't move, but he could see it. So when he finally is able to start moving, he comes out and he speaks life, or he speaks not life, but he speaks curse over Ham. He says, since you as my son have been disobedient and would do something like that unto me, I speak over your son, Canaan. That's how far back this goes. All praises to the Most High, right? It goes back even past the times of Abraham. It goes back to the time of Noah, to where it was already promised that Shem, that the children of Shem, which are the children of Hebrew, which are the children of Abraham, which are the children of Isaac, which are the children of Israel. It goes back to them, that we would come and inhabit Canaan. It was already guaranteed way back when. All praises to the Most High. How you doing, TAAMP? It was already promised way back when that that's what would happen. So y'all didn't send the spies in to say, I need you to tell people that, oh yeah, y'all actually kept his word. No, I just need you to go and tell them, right? Test me out. So he literally said, hey, I'm gonna have you test me out. Go ahead and send them just so they can tell you everything I said is true. And they did that, except then they said, although everything he said is true, going all the way back to the times of Noah, everything that has come out of our family has ended up being exactly what Yah said. We still don't believe that he can keep us because we're grasshoppers in the enemy's eyes. There's nothing worse than when you've been enslaved for so long that even when Yah begins to just pick up where he left off and show you that through worship and through trust and through praise and through honor and through respect and through work, that you will be able to get everything that he says. There's nothing worse than because you still have the mindset of a slave, that you still have the mindset of one who's supposed to build bricks without straw, who still has the mindset we're supposed to build golden calves, who still has the mindset to where, hey, Moses is saved on behalf of a people, and yet we act like he don't know what he's talking about, who have the mindset to see plagues be split up in between your oppressor and you, but still think that deserve to be under the oppressor while the oppressor is losing. They out here straight up losing their mind to the point to where they finally say enough is enough. Just go. Whatever you ask us for. The same way that Yah told you that your sisters, he told the men, your wives were going to ask for gold on their way out. They were not going to leave empty. They were going to leave with cattle and gold, and your children were going to wear the things that your oppressors used to wear while they were oppressing you. Everything he said is true. And we still say, but can he bring us out though? It's funny, but it's not funny. Sometimes you got, what's that saying? You got to laugh sometimes to keep from crying. All this stuff has been true, 100%. And yet, here it is again, that all we have to do is move like Yah says move. How you doing, Brother Kofi? All it says is we got to move how Yah says move. And we're like, nah, not this time. Thank you for the love, babe. Now, he's been 100% accurate. But something about this time, I don't know. His word has been true all the way, but just today, I just don't think that he's going to tell the truth. He told the truth about how people would do things in his name, how they would change his name, how they would change his language, how they would scatter us, how we would be enslaved, how they would put the yoke of bondage upon our neck. But he's also told the truth about how now he's revealing himself in a manner that can't be denied. He's showing the world he's always loved you. Persons are coming to our feet to learn from us, all these different things. He's showing that we're going to come together from all four corners. He's beginning to have us to have the land, and even working towards us having the land that is a land that nobody can take from us when heaven meets earth, the new heaven and new earth meeting. But yet, but today, though, for this situation, though, he's just not enough. Right? He can't tell no lie. He ain't never lied. Oops, excuse me. Excuse me. He ain't never lied. If somebody ain't never lied, he ain't never lied. Y'all ain't never lied. But today is the day. All right. Let's go on to the next group. All praise to the Most High. Is this Barak, anybody? It's a little different way we're teaching this today. Because people would be like, I've never really gone through this in Exodus chapter 3, but it's part of it. You need to know what's going on. Right? You need to know what kind of spirit we're running into. If we're going into the promised land, right? We're going to the new land. We're going to the new Canaan. But we got to know what we're dealing with. All right. Next group up. There's a group called the Jebusites. All praises to the Most High. Next group up, we call this group the Jebusites. We know they probably wouldn't even use the just sound, right? Even though this is not an Israelite language per se. But that being said, it does have some phonetic stuff in it that would match some of the stuff that we do, although it's not necessarily Shemitic. But anyways, so let's go to these. Let's go to, they occupied the city of Jebus. Now this is interesting because guess what the city of Jebus will eventually turn into? The city of Jebus. Matter of fact, this is the city of, it's also known not as Jebus, but this also would have been in the times of Abraham, a city that you know well as well. In the time of Abraham, this is where Melchizedek, right, was the priest of, and he received the tithe from Abraham there. Right? Where Melchizedek, where's Melchizedek? He was the priest of what? Not just of Canaan, but he was the priest of, and the king of a particular city, of Salam. There you go. So you have Jebus, known by some people who occupy the city, they know it as Jebus, right? We know it as Salam, right? And later on, you will hear it called Yahar-Shalem, which is pretty close to Jerusalem, or what we call today Jerusalem. Right. So the Jebusites, they're at the capital city. What was in Jerusalem? Christ will not be born in Jerusalem. He'll be born in Bethlehem, right? But what is important is in Jerusalem. Salam, by the way, is just another place's way of saying shalom or peace, right? So this place was called peace, but this is where Jebus lives. This is where so you put Jebus Salam, that's their peace. Later on it becomes Yah's peace, Yahar Shalom, right? But what's there? The capital is Jerusalem, so the capital of everything we do. So the king will live there. The capital flows through there. It's an important place for us, right? So whatever's going on with the Jebusites, we need to pay attention, right? Once again, they occupied the promise. So there's a capital. There's a place that's going to be for us. But also, too, what else is there? So that's a great one. The capital. What else? Think about pertaining to worship. What is in Jerusalem? Okay, where the ministry starts, where would the ministry start? Where is it that every person in Israel would try to get to at least once a year? There we go, the temple. The temple. And by the way, can I just, amen, the temple. And can I just put a little something here? Can I just put a little pin in this real quick? Do you not know that your body is the temple of the living Yah? Shalom Takwa, how you doing? Do you not know that your body is the temple of the living Yah? I'm going to say it again. Do you not know that your body is the temple of the living Yah? When we're talking about taking back, we're talking about getting what's promised to you. You're promised to be able to be over your body. How is it that so many persons have tried to occupy your body? How is it that so many medications have tried to occupy your body? How is it that so many persons have tried to own your body and call it their property? How is it that we're still trying to use products that are not for our body? How is it that we're not even trying to become the body together and forsaking the assembly of the brethren together? See, if I might just put a little spiritual pin in this real quick to deal with the spiritual body, really it's even your physical. We got to stop allowing persons to be able to control it. And thank you for the love, babe. I appreciate you. Love you. Right? Love you. You gotta get to this place where you gotta recognize that your body is the temple, right? In Jerusalem is where the temple resided. So you gotta recognize that the Jebusites, there are persons out there, the Jebusites representing those persons who are in the capital city, right? In your heart. There are persons that are doing things to your heart, and you're not keeping your heart clean and pure. There are persons who are running ragged over your mind. You're not keeping your mind pure and clean. Where's your helmet of salvation you keep talking about? The fiery darts of the enemy keep hitting you. Where is the shield of faith to quench the fiery darts? You keep talking about the truth and this and that. Well, where's the belt that's supposed to be around your loins? You keep talking about all this stuff about how we're going to make sure we're in the word. The word is the sword. The word is the weapon. Here it is. You're getting ready to go and claim what's yours, but you're not using the word to cleanse yourself. How you going to be cleaning everybody else and cleansing everybody else and taking care of everybody else and providing for everybody else, but you ain't taking time out to cleanse you? I'm going to live unclean so that everybody else can feel comfortable? No. If I take care of you, I got to take care of you through the prism of cleanliness. If not, I'm going to just be honest. I'm in the kingdom. I will lose my mind. And I've decided not to lose my mind no more. I've decided to protect my peace, my shalom. I've decided to protect my heart. I'm not having heart attack, right, because I'm going out of control for somebody who's constantly trying to tell me that the kingdom is not what they go by. I've done that before in the past. It don't make no sense. Here it is, you talking about peace. Where are your shoes at? Because your shoes got to be prepared with the shod, right? Shod with the shoes of preparation of peace, preparation of peace. There's no peace, but you talking about that you walking in this way. You can't walk in this peace, and there's no shalom. We're not even supposed to greet one another or invite somebody to our house or go into somebody's house without shalom, without shalom, without shalom, without greetings of peace. If so, I'm supposed to, if you can't, and if I don't get, sorry, and if I do give peace and you don't return the peace of Yah back, I'm supposed to repent and turn away, wipe my feet off, right? So that I don't take anything from your house with me and proceed to go on to the next place until my shalom is taken. That's word, that's scripture, that's culture. That's what Christ said. Servants of Christ, I'm just talking Christ, I'm just talking Mashiach. I'm just talking Mashiach. I'm not talking nothing else. Look. We are so busy letting other persons occupy us and occupy our mind and tell us, well, you know, this culture, this, look, just because black folk did it, can I go to the other side? Because y'all think I'm going to talk about white folk. Just because black folk did it doesn't mean it's our culture. Well, you know, in Kemet, they were wearing this and they were doing their hair like this and you were doing, that's not even you. I'm not saying there's none of you in that, but there's a lot of that that's not even you. But you want to wear it so bad that you'll wear something from the people that oppressed you. If you were around in their time and said you were an Israelite, they would have said, go out there and make me bricks, boy. But you want to be them so bad that you'll talk more about them and learn more about them than about yourself. Come on, Elder Tamara. Envy not of your oppressors. Stop trying to follow their ways. Here you are in modern Kemet, and you've been freed. You have a chance to walk free, to go out on dry land, to do the things that Yah told you to do, to become the people of Yah, to worship correctly, to come together, to bond, to come out of bondage that you might be bonded by something else. And yet, Can we keep it above? And yet, you can't wait for the next opportunity you have to go back to bondage. That's right. You want to serve two masters, but you can only serve one. You'll either love one and hate the other. It's impossible to have two masters. It's impossible. You can go to two Shifu, you can go to two Kung Fu masters, right? And get a little something, but only one can be your master. If you try to have more than one, you begin to hate one for something and love one for the other. Can I also show the other side of that coin? Can we flip that coin real quick? You can only have, one set of disciples. I can't try to disciple the world and disciple persons in the kingdom simultaneously. I'll love one and I'll hate the other. Amen. Thank you, babe. You'll be double-minded. That cognitive dissonance is something else. See, and what persons want a lot of the pastors to do, because you want your ears tickled, right? You got that itching ear, and you want somebody to give you that Q-tip. A lot of times you won't even have something, in your ear for the Q-tip. You just got an itch, right? Nothing come out, that Q-tip be just as white as when it came in, but you needed that scratch. No purpose in it. I won't say no purpose. You needed an itch, but that's what a person treat the preachers like, and treat the word like, and they keep up for preachers for themselves, person, so they can use them like that Q-tip. I really ain't had nothing wrong. I just didn't like the way that was feeling. I couldn't reach it, so I'm gonna use you to reach it, and then I'm not gonna use you to actually stay clean. When it's time for me to stay clean, I use another brand. Right? Or when you're not cleaning me the way that I want, when you're not doing exactly what I want anymore, I'll go ahead and throw you away. I'll get another brand. I'll get another product. Right? But in the time, what I need, you'll fulfill my need just enough. That's why there's a lot of so-called church hoppers. You go from one place to the next place to the next place to the next place. You keep going and going and going. You're not really trying to stay at the same place for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50. See, that's how you build stuff. Now, I'm not saying all places are worthy of that, but I'm saying there's a lot of persons who ain't ready for something like that, dedicated. Like, are you, like, persons say, man, I'm with you, Pastor Kofi, till the wheels fall off. But then all of a sudden, they just don't like something that I said, and I guess the wheels fell off. I've been that dude before. Not that much. I praise God. That's something that, besides the military, that's something that I've usually been pretty decent at trying to stay at a place. But I've had a little bit of that too. I don't like the way they say it, or they're not moving fast enough in this. So you start trying to find an exit. But we got integrity. We hold them. All right. So you got to recognize it. So just putting that little pin in there, right? That there are persons who don't realize, but your body is the living temple. Now also too, we got to respect the temple, or at least respect the gathering, because when we come together, right, to Jerusalem, when we come together, right, when we bring different temples together, you got to recognize. See, there's a temple that's in Elder Alma. There's a temple that's in Solomon. There's a temple that's in Rose. There's a temple that's in Thomas. There's a temple that's in Tanya. There's a temple that's in Linda. There's a temple that's in Anais. There's a temple that's in Lamar. There's a temple that's in Raj, et cetera, et cetera. There's a temple that's in all of us. But when we come together, it should be one temple, because that's integrity. That's integral. That's integrated. As I said earlier, everybody keep talking about that you were integrated. You were never integrated, because if you were integrated, there can only be one belief system. Did you know that? You can't tell me about you having integrity as a nation and everybody's integrated, but then you all have different beliefs. That's not how it works. Somebody says, oh, but I don't want any part of that. That's cool, no problem. That's your culture. But if you're talking about integrity, you can't have integrity unless everybody's allowed, everybody's chakudash, everybody's whole, everybody's one. There is no integrity in your marriage. This is why we have arguments in our marriages. You want to know why? We have arguments in our marriages because there's no oneness. If you're one on stuff, then you have integrity, because the integrity is about what? Integrated. You're integrated. What you do, I do. What I do, you do. Boom. Integrity. Now, obviously, there's other things that can help. I'm not saying it's that simple per se. However, doesn't that make it a little more easy to think about? Person say, I don't want to lose. Men will say, women, there's men of SOC, women of SOC. I've talked about marriage and stuff, and I'll hear from both sides in different ways, basically saying, I don't want to give myself up in marriage. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not saying you need to give all yourself up, but you're going to have to give up some, because you're going to have integrity. The only way to have integrity in your marriage is that you don't belong to you no more. This is why even in fasting, right? You have to ask your spouse for permission. Did you know that? According to scripture, you can't just go, I'm a fast today. How you doing, Elder and Nice? I see you, you're one, right? You can't just go, I'm a fast today. If you're in a marriage, you got to go to your spouse. Because the two of you are one. You have to say, hey, is it all right if I fast? Because if one fasts, the other fasts. Even if that person doesn't join you per se, that person's still going to have to be affected by your decision. That's right. You're going to have to become holy. That's what holiness is. You don't want to talk about that's what. That's why be careful. Because the person that you're supposed to be the most holy for outside of the Most High is your spouse. Some of you got this twisted. You're going to be holy for your children before your spouse. My children come before my spouse. Then you're not ready. You have no integrity. Not for a marriage. Well, I've integrated some. I don't know. My child is being trained to be able to take care of his wife. Mm-hmm. At some point, he's not going to be in my house. Even when they come together and even when they join up and when they make sure they raise their babies together, we're going to help them. But then they're going back to what they should have as inheritance. So they can be whole. So they can be one. I'm training him to make sure he'll be a husband to one wife, not be a husband to his parents. That don't even make sense. See, that's integrity. That's how it should be in the temple. In the temple, if you're gonna make your temple holy, if your marriage is gonna be holy, if SOC is gonna be holy, if your children are gonna be holy, if you're gonna come and have an actual holy Bible and live by it, it means the Bible and you must become one. You must become integrated so much, interwoven into each other so much. And when persons read the Bible, they'll see you in it. And when persons see you, they'll read the Bible in you. How you doing, DK? Welcome, welcome on, welcome back. See, but we might not be ready for that. That's a different level, but that's Yah's level. See, that's integrity. We're not talking about my man's level, because man's level is not righteous. And for our righteousness is as filthy rags, it's as period rags, it's as blood rags, it's as those things that make us unclean, unlawful. However, come on, somebody. However, if we follow his righteousness, his standard, his ways are not our ways, nor his thoughts our thoughts. You ready to go higher in him? It's going to stretch you some. You're going to have to be ready to come out of your regular self. See, you're trying your best. See, the Jebusites. See, once again, we're talking about today those who occupy the promise, who occupy your promise, who occupy our promise. See, the Jebusites, they occupied Jerusalem, the place that we had given tithe to, down payment on what we were coming back from the time of Abraham. And they maintained control of Jerusalem for centuries. Do you know that? A lot of persons might not catch this. But see, the Jebusites were being fought. These Canaanites, in particular, these Jebusites, they really didn't even get removed fully, right? Until King David reigned. See, we just go, oh yeah, Israel just came in. Canaan was ours off the top. No. Canaan became ours and started to be known as Israel, but there were still holdovers from persons who had camps, who had walled off cities, who had things, and they kept on fighting for what they would not let us occupy the promise. Think about that. Matter of fact, we're just gonna do some quick math. Right, watch this. Hopefully I asked this correctly. Right, I think I'm gonna ask this correctly. How many generations are from Moses to David in the Bible? Let's do something real quick. All they're trying to tell me is that I don't care if they're not from the same family. I need a time. Okay, so I'm gonna just go with the. They give me an arbitrary number. I'm gonna have to do some research on it, right? Really, I guess I could say, well, who's in David's family in the time of Moses? Judah. Who's in Judah at the time of Moses? No, 40. So 42 generations. Is it 42 generations taking us from Abraham to Christ? Is it 42? I thought 42 was from Abraham to Christ, and like it was, and you split that 42 up, right, into What is it times 3? What's 42 divided by? Can you divide 42 by 3? Yeah. So 42 is from, yeah, from Abraham. It's 17 from Moses. I'm looking specifically from Moses from Moses to David, but it won't give it to me because it wants me to. It's telling me they're not the same lineage. I don't care about the lineage. But I'm trying to figure out who from Judah. If I can get a name from Judah, let me ask that. Let's see if I can if it'll give me that. Said 14. Yeah, so it's 14, 14. Yeah, 14, 14, 14. So 14 is Abraham to David, I believe. And then it's in 14 David to captivity. And then it's 14 from captivity to the Messiah. Right? So from Abraham to David is 14. So it's got to be so. Okay, I'm making a guesstimation. I have to research this later to get the exact number. Maybe somebody can research it and give it to me. Right? Oh no, no problem, no problem. I was just trying to, because you were right about 42, but 42 goes from Abraham to the Messiah, right? So it's 14 divided by 3, or 14 times 3 gets 42. So if it's 14 from Abraham to David, then we looking at what, like something like 9, 8 or 9, 10 generations somewhere in there. Yeah, I was gonna say 10. So I'll just, for right now, let's just say around 10. For right now, it might be a little less, right? But let's just say right now, somewhere around 10 generations, because persons live longer back then too, right? So let's say somewhere around 10 generations from the time of from the time of Moses to the time of David, right? Let's just say that. Let's do it that way. Let's say about 10 generations, okay? So about 10 generations removed. All praises to the Most High, and thank God for your help. So I was all over the place on that one, right? So think about that. That means that from Moses and them being promised that they would come into contact with the Jebusites. Yeah, that's what it did say. It said it's about 400 years. So about 10 generations, let's say about 400 years. Somewhere in there, taking us from the Jebusites finally being kicked out of Jerusalem. It was promised to us, and yet it took 400 years be something else. We keep seeing that pattern keep repeating itself, doesn't it? That numerology. By the way, 400 for us is Tav. It's the last character of the alphabet. After 400, it's time for that thing to be finished. It's time for us to be perfected. It's time for that to be complete. It's time for us to be able to use what's been perfected through the sacrifice for us to go to the next level. For those who know those Hebrew characters, at 400, it means something else, doesn't it? Right? But so going on. So it took 400 years. See, in our mind, we just go, oh, we took over Canaan. We went to where Jerusalem was, which was where Salam was, which is where Melchizedek was, which is where the tithes was given, and which was what promised to us from the days of Noah. And we just took over. No. We came over, and even though Israel was established as Israel, we still could not even through King Saul, not even by the time you hit your first king. It took the second king, the first king that was a man after Yah's own heart, even though he had his flaws. It took 400 years, 10 generations or so, to get us to this place to where we could finally say Jerusalem belonged to Israel. It was promised while we were still enslaved in Kemet, while we were still in chains, while we were still in bondage. It was promised back then. But it took 400 years, 10 generations, for us to finally get from what was promised to seeing it fully manifested. That means that we had a capital that we lived in, and we were fighting the people who were in the capital that we lived in to be able to finally be able to acknowledge Yah and have the temple set up. And if you notice, that makes a lot of sense too, because as we said earlier, right after David, who had blood on his hands and couldn't do it anyways, right after David finally is able to defeat the Jebusites and say Jerusalem finally belongs to Yah and belongs to Israel, then right after that is when King Solomon can finally build the temple. It took 400 years to be qualified, 400 plus years to finally be qualified to build the temple. And here it is, you think that Yah gonna do what he said, like this. See, this is why we gotta know the culture. This is why we gotta do these studies. This is why we gotta break down Exodus the way we're breaking it down. Because if not, we'll miss a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of you didn't even know that there were two midwives that were the reason why a whole bunch of Israelite boys weren't off in the first place. You just think about the story starts with Moses' mama. If you even give her credit, don't just think about Moses, as if he didn't come from somewhere. But we got to know context and culture. How you doing, user 17391399057, etc. Thanks for being part of the community, right? Appreciate you for being on. We got to realize what's going on. We have this thing in our mind once again that it's going to happen just like that, but no, it's not. It's going to take a little bit. All right, now we're just going to finish up. We're running out of time. I'm coming to my close. I'm about to close. Right? What is going on? Okay. All right, give me a second. All right, so just real quick, as we get ready to take our leave, and we'll come back to Exodus chapter 4 tomorrow. Prayerfully, we'll see you guys in between for the evening session this evening. So, why are these nations even mentioned? What's the point of these nations that we've just been going over all this time? Why are they even mentioned? Well, Elohim is reminding Moses of the promise that he made to Abraham, that we said again, and to Isaac, that we said again, and to Jacob, that we said again, concerning the land occupied by these peoples. Once again, they occupied the promise. There was a promise made before Moses. There was a promise made way back to Abraham. There was a promise, once again, as you follow, that goes all the way back to Noah, who spoke over Shem, that he would be able to take over Canaan, since Canaan is the son of Ham, who decided to do what he did to Noah. He's reminding Moses. See, when he says, I'm the Elohim of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, he's not just saying that for any reason, just for bragging points or browning points. He's saying, no. You guys should recognize me for who I am. And you guys need to know my name is Yahweh. That's a monument for me, a memorial to me, rather. And anybody who knows me, they know me, and that's a memorial. Everybody who is mine knows me by that name from this point henceforth and forevermore, and know that they need to know that they come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, physically or grafted in. They need to become part of this nation, or else everything that is spoken from this point on is not for them. Right? He says that the people are occupying the land that goes way back to a promise that I made. There are offerings that were made. When we go into Canaan, there are already places where offerings were made. There are already altars that have been built. There are already wells that have been dug. Right? This is why the woman at the well says, Are you greater than the one who dug this well? Because the well had already been dug even before we came back. This thing goes back. This thing is a promise. This thing is not something that's new. This faith is not something that's new. Just because persons are finally having ears to hear it does not mean that this has not been something that's been preached and hasn't been talked about even from Revelation. So, number one, we have to be reminded that this is a promise that goes back to Abraham. Number two, this also shows the challenge that is ahead. He's promised us something, but it doesn't mean that there are zero challenges moving ahead. This shows the challenge that is ahead. It shows that Israel is not moving into territory that's empty. It's promised to you, but it's not empty. Everything that he said is in there, but it doesn't mean that somebody's not in your way. You're going to face cities and armies and kingdoms that have established themselves by eating off of what is yours. Is that it, right? Come on. Are you ready for that? He also, number three, if we can, he shows them this because he wants to demonstrate Elohim's power. Weapons been formed, that's right, come on. Right, and by the way, that song, that scripture is Isaiah 54, right? No weapon formed against me shall prosper. It won't work, no, right? Then we go into Yah will do what he said, right? But that's not what it said. After it says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And it says what? And every tongue that rises against us shall be condemned. And then after that, guess who it's for? Then it says, for this is the heritage, even your inheritance, if you will. For this is the heritage of Israel. If you're not going to be Israel or coming to Israel or be grafted in, that's what Paul said you got to be, even if you are coming from somewhere else. Romans chapter 11, you still grafted in. He says, if you try to get rid of Elohim, he says, Elohim's covenant with Israel, he said, Elohim forbid. Thank you. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon formed against you shall be able to prosper, and every tongue that rises against you shall be condemned, for this is the inheritance of Israel. If you're not trying to be Israel or trying to be connected and saying Israel doesn't matter, then you can't say that no more. Because it's not for you. Just say, not for me. It's not for you. It is all right. Right? But we have to demonstrate, but three, this demonstrates Elohim's power. Right? Why is he talking about who's going to be taking over? The nations were numerous and strong. Yet, Yahweh would inherit the land because of divine intervention, not because of Israel's military strength alone. Doesn't matter how strong you are or are not. Remember, he was getting ready to fight tens of thousands, or Israel's getting ready to fight tens of thousands. The Most High says that you're outnumbered. You got about, if I can't recall the exact number, so please forgive me, I'm gonna probably get this wrong. Is it something like 32,000? Something like that are there? He immediately says that's way too much and sends away tens of thousands. They get down, they got like 10,000 or 1,000, something like that. I'd have to go read it again, please forgive me, but they get down, they dwindle the number down. Yah says it's still too much. Now they're already outnumbered when they had the 32,000. He says still too much. So they whittle it down again. Then he says, this is what I need you to do. You still got too much. So this is what I need you to do. He says, I need you to drink, to give them a drinking test. Take them to the water. Take them to the spirit. Right? I need to see how they drink. And so they go down to the water and they drink and they lap, right? And some persons, they just put their head in and they drink and face down. But then there are some who drink, and as they drink, but they make sure that they are always looking at their surroundings. They're always looking at stuff. And he says, those are the ones that do that, keep them. And that only numbers 300. Now we talking about tens of thousands versus 300. But Yah said, no. I need you to kind of understand that when I win this, and you win this, you win it not because of your strength, right? It's great. You could have used the army. You could have used all this training. Sometimes, though, I'm going to throw that out the window because every once in a while, I just want to do something in a manner where you see that the things you think are ridiculous, that are ludicrous, right, are the things that I do. And I want you to not believe these things because I do so many of them anyway. Sometimes you miss them and you make them mundane. Every once in a while, though, I got to have you do something to shock your system a little bit. Every once in a while, I got to throw some cold water on you real quick. Sometimes I got to do that ice bucket challenge every once in a while and do something in a manner where you go, ooh, right? Oh, he's there. He's with us, right? So he did this to show that no matter how much you think is there, my divine power is more important than the power of your military. If we could recall that, sometimes we would stop giving so much credit to some of these military, nations that we keep acting like because they got great military somehow, some way, they're better. We should obey them more than Yah, right? Okay. Last point. Last thing I have. Number 4. Why do they need this? Last one. Last thing I have for today. Right. This was to warn Israel against idolatry. You said it was the pandemic for you? Come on. You'll do something to shock your system to show you don't have to depend on it. Number 4, last thing I have. This is to warn Israel against idolatry. He says, I got to warn you against idolatry. Many of these nations, they practice religions or their culture, right? But their religions involving idols. Fertility cults, Ishtar, that, right? A lot of stuff that you run into, Artemis stuff later on that we see in Revelation mentioned more and stuff with the bears and all that stuff. But these persons that were in fertility cults, a lot of sexual rituals. That's why a lot of persons, that's why to this day there's this holdover to where you might not know how somebody voted, but you know what they like sexually. It's crazy. I'm not talking about because of your partner. Even though some of you have partners where you do all this stuff sexually, but have no clue where they are politically until it's too late, right? That happens quite often. There's this whole thing now where persons are like, I voted for Trump, and all of us have voted for Trump. We didn't know that they hated women. We didn't know that they did this. We didn't know that. Well, first of all, I don't believe you. But number 2, right, is we don't believe in voting here. I'm not telling you who to vote for because we have a king. We don't vote. That being said, all this person, well, we didn't know this, or we didn't know this, or we didn't know. Okay, cool. Let's say that you're telling the truth. You didn't know, right? But you didn't even think it was something you should find out because you come from a culture where it's more important for you guys to lay down with each other than it is for you to actually know what do you believe. Oh, we just hit something. Holy Spirit just hit something. That shook somebody up right there. You live in a society where it's more important to date, but you're not supposed to be trained to be married. But in our culture, you don't date. There's no such thing in the Bible as dating. You get married because you're trained in what it is to be a husband or wife from birth. It's prayed about, it's thought about, it's sought, and basically persons make agreements. And persons that know you very well, like your parents, have to be in on the agreement to touch and agree with the decision that you made if you decide that you want to marry somebody. That we as a community come together, then we bring it before a board, and that person has already had to show before they are even trusted. They had to be qualified to be a man in our community, a husband in our community, and a father. And she already had to be qualified to be a woman in our community, a mother in our community, and a woman in our community, a wife in our community, and a mother. But in what you in now, your babies now are supposed to tell you if they are he, him, she, her, or they, them. And persons are out here telling you that masculinity is a construct. First, it was toxic, so you got to watch out for jokers when they start working with God's will. If you didn't know, go watch the Joe. It was on the Joe Budden show not that long ago. That's hip hop. And hip hop's supposed to be as gangster and as masculine as it get. Although that ain't our masculinity, but as masculine as they say it get. Right on the show, they brought a brother on there, and that brother came on there with that light voice and made the point to say that, hey man, masculinity is actually fake. You actually have to be an actor to be masculine. See, LGBTQ plus is actually what you're supposed to be. But see, there's constructs that were made, so you have to pretend to fit into a construct in order to be male. But being male is something that's a construct. Get out the way. See what I'm saying? Like, see, they started attacking. Everybody was cool with it. They started saying, we don't need, see, it was, oh, well, you know what? Women aren't respected. Which, by the way, women don't get as much respect as they deserve. We ain't going to play that game. Y'all need more respect. Right, sisters? But hopefully you get the context, okay? I'm not playing that game that you've always been respected. That ain't it, all right? We know that ain't the truth. That being said, right? There's this thing that persons be playing around, and we just let this stuff go. And so it was before. It was like, hey, where maybe we don't need the construct of family that we need. Maybe husbands and wives don't need to live together. Hey, they started walking into our families and they started walking to home back in the 20s and 30s and saying to cats, yo, we'll give you $15 extra a month if y'all don't live together. We'll give you $50 at one point if y'all don't live together. You can still be married and everything, but the husband just can't live in the house. And they say, ooh, we're on tough times working for massa because somebody said slavery was over, but we still out here in these plantations and we still can't get out of this, and we still getting hung, and they still hanging us if we try to vote, and women still can't vote, and even when the white women can't vote, we still can't vote, and that's up. So if you make it easier on us and you taking our jobs away, then yeah, we'll break up the house. That's what they did. That's what they did. And then it went from that to, oh, you know what? Now we got to have a woman's revolution. What's the women's revolution? We got to have something that makes sure that women are there. What's the women's revolution called? And I'm not saying that, once again, you don't need help, sisters, but I'm talking about that specific one. What's the one that was called that Gloria Steinem was over? CIA operative, by the way, who she herself got married. That's called the what? The feminist movement. And they put an IST on there to make you feel a certain way, right? They put an IST on there to make you feel a certain way. Why? Because the IST means you're supposed to be what? You're supposed to be proficient at it. So you can't be proficient at being a woman unless you're a feminist. Problem with that is that the feminist movement was not for all women. It was not a womanist movement. It was a feminist movement. It was designed specifically for what they call feminine, which for them was so-called white women, right, who didn't get the piece of the pie they were supposed to get from the so-called white man. And so they fought their own husbands, even though they stayed married to them. It was a family fight. It was like playing spades. It was like playing bones. It was like playing dominoes. It was like playing bid whist. They had a fight. It was a family fight amongst themselves, but they still came together ultimately at the end. Gloria Steinem gets married after she was hiring and training young women to go into the other communities and tell them to come up with things and write books against their own men to make sure that they would take, and usually like 15, 60-year-old girls who don't even know nothing about life, let alone about being a woman yet, and would have them write things to be able to split up your community. CIA operative. So we went from, hey, split up your family, and that kept on increasing, to then put the feminist movement with it, right, to go against it. And then what do we keep on doing? We go from there to then all of a sudden it's, hey, you know what, you guys be talking about this. It's okay if men wear different colors, and it's okay if y'all do, and it's okay if you dress a certain way. Matter of fact, if you're going to be a man that's going to make a lot of money, ask Little Richard. He'll tell you. Ask all these cats that came out. Ask the bass player from Earth, Wind, and Fire. Ask Prince. Ask Michael Jackson. Ask all these persons, do you know the reason why they did this stuff and they were effeminate? Ask James Brown, who you would say, man, well, he manly in his voice, but look at how he had to fry his hair too, and what they had to do. Ask all these brothers who started doing that to fit in, who started becoming effeminate, because, hey, they didn't mind you coming into the club if you looked like you were gay. But they can't have you coming in there looking like you a man. So black man, black star, right? If we're gonna use that terminology, when you come in, you can sing at the white establishment. You still gotta come through the side door or the back door, but you can sing at the white establishment. You can even make these girls swoon, but as long as in our minds as white men, we believe that they're swooning because they think you're gay. It's cool for us. It's wild, but it's true. See, somebody might think I'm reading too much Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, maybe not reading enough. right? But this is reality, right? And then from there, it went to, oh, well, we're to this and to blah, blah. Now, look, I'm somebody who's always real careful to say, please stop telling these boys they can't cry. See, please stop telling them just get over it. Please stop just telling them they this and that. They need to learn how to work through their emotions. That's why we become men that can't work through their emotions. That's right, tearing our house while building down hers, right? Right? So, or down while building hers, yeah, and even really ultimately not building hers because they're tearing down the protection and the stuff. And now the men begin to do it because the men want to be like the white men. So we as brothers, we want to go ahead and tear down our sisters to make it okay to say this. Like, I'm not, look, love who you love, but I'm gonna be honest with you, brothers. You saying I don't date black women because they're black is one of the craziest things that I've ever heard in my life. Anybody who does it. If you're a white man, somebody, I don't date white women because they're white. It's one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life. You not loving yourself is something crazy, right? I don't date Asian women because they're Asian, but you Asian don't make no sense, right? That means you don't love yourself. I'm not saying that you can only marry yourself, so to speak, right? Using that terminology, but I'm just saying something wrong. The oppressor that got in your head, the person that told you that you was nothing. Now you talk trash about it, but in our community, especially the so-called black community, the Negro community, right? The African-American community, whatever, we talk a lot of trash about our women and not realize like it's because we hate ourselves. You can't hate your woman who you came out of her womb and not hate yourself. And this is not a party for me to say that I hate everybody else. No, I'm saying we got to stop hating ourselves. Just because I love myself doesn't mean I can't have love for you. But if I hate myself and if I hate where I came from, then it's going to be really difficult. You probably shouldn't deal with me because that means I don't love you ultimately, or I only love you because I love the idea of you making me better than what I should be within myself when we first meet. So I'll start leaning on you because I didn't have love for me when we came in. So my love for myself only comes from you, but that means I'm always leaning on you. No wonder you think this is a heavy relationship. Oh yeah. You say you got to be careful. I'm not saying you can't do whatever. Love who you love. Love, really, you should love who the Most High tells you to, and you should love those that are part of your nation. That's really what it should be biblically. But that being said, you know, as the world says, love who you love, okay, right, in that context. But I hope you get what I'm saying is that if you hate yourself, and you got to get with somebody because you hate yourself, you never loved yourself and you'll never truly love them anyways. You love the idea of them making you better so that you don't, or you love the idea of them covering whatever you hate about yourself so you actually don't make what you hate about yourself greater or just simply learn to love it. I'm a little over time. I'm almost finished. But we just got to be honest about this. So now we get past that stuff. Now we in the feminist movement. Right now we're doing all this stuff. And guess what starts happening? Now we get to a point to where we're like, oh, now we're going to add drugs in. At the same time, now we put official stuff together, whether it be through EEOC, whether it be through whatever DEI stuff you want to talk about, whether it be through affirmative action stuff, whatever, we're going to put stuff together to start further separating each other. And now, once the AIDS epidemic happens, and it starts affecting, you know, at the most, I didn't say only, but at the most, white males who are LGBTQ+, that wasn't what they called themselves back then, but you know, are those things that at that time. Well, now we're going to start saying that we need to make sure that we understand that we shouldn't attack them. Matter of fact, now that you've attacked them and you attack them, see, you don't understand. It's worse than being black out here, being LGBTQ+. So we need to make sure that you understand that masculinity is toxic. You know, that was made by two men that were LGBTQ+. They told you that since they didn't want to be masculine, masculinity was toxic because it would protect them. Does it protect your masculine man? Does it protect your son? Does it protect his phallus? Does it protect his sexuality? Right? But can I be honest with you? Look, Holy Spirit, have your way. I'm trying to stop. I'm gonna just. We're not gonna go that much longer. But I gotta be thorough in this real quick. Look, hate me all you want for saying it. I'm telling you the truth. I haven't said one thing to you that's inaccurate. Right? This is a plan. Now I need you to comprehend this. Look at this. The The attack has become so much, right, on sexuality that you guys don't even recognize that we're coming into stuff that you swear that you would never accept. Because you say to yourself that you would never accept somebody to start talking about or doing anything to your child, whether talking spiritually, emotionally, physically, psychologically, whatever. Would never allow somebody to begin to do something that deals with sexuality with your child. Your child should be able to become an adult. Your child should be able to be as chaste as possible. Your child should be able to have an innocent existence without learning this stuff. Even though if you send them to school and stuff, I'm telling you, the ship has sailed on some of that. They've heard a lot of stuff, right? But that being said, that's the goal. However, you say that the school should be able to tell you that you can't tell your child not to go ahead and tell you what kind of sexuality they have while your child has not even hit puberty yet. Am I lying? If you don't get it, let me say it again. Maybe I didn't say it correctly. You say that nobody should be able to speak sexuality, talk sexuality, touch sexuality, whatever, with your child. We believe that to their marriage. Some of you say they're adults and they should be as innocent and as chaste as possible. That being said, your child can go to school and begin to tell you at home without you saying anything, or else you can lose the child in some stage. They can come home and tell you that hey, I learned in school about sexuality and I choose that I am not a male anymore, I'm fluid. I'm not a female anymore, I'm trans. I identify as a female. I'm non-binary. I'm non-cis. I'm cis this. You have to learn all these things, and somebody told you. So now your men are wearing dresses, or your men are sitting up there doing things that are effeminate. Your men, the singer, Tank. I'm sorry, sisters. I know Tank can sing. I still play some Tank songs here or there. I know Tank can sing. I know this is gonna mess some persons up. I'm not trying to mess and rock your world or anything. I'm just being honest. Your boy Tank trying to sing all these songs and talk about how masculine he is with all them, makeup and everything he got on. But still, talking about how masculine he is and women falling out because he can sing and he can swoon and he can croon. And meanwhile, your boy Tank is out here telling persons that if a man gives fellatio to another man, that doesn't make him homosexual. You can get that all the way out of here. I'm sorry, you can get that all the way out. I'm just saying. I've heard sisters, right? When I used to play music and stuff, and I do some traveling stuff and playing music, I heard sisters literally say, "I don't care if he blah blah or not. Whenever he sings, it makes me feel a certain way. We got to get that all the way out." I'm just being honest. We done been taught wrong. When you got an emotional tie like that, that's satanic. It is. Be mad at me. Tell them I said it. If you tell somebody, tell them I said it, so they can say he's poisoning your mind. You don't have to stand up and say no. I believe it. Hopefully you get to that level. But if you need to, tell them I said it. Tell them I'm the one poisoning your mind. But I'm just keeping it a buck. That's satanic. That you say that it. Look, if somebody watch this, if somebody walked up to your child and just said you weren't there, your child is skipping down the street, having a grand old time, right? You can see him from far away, but you're not really there. And somebody walks up to your child and says, "Hey, you know that if you like to be with, men, you can be with men. If you like to be with women, you can be with women. If you like to do," if they started talking to your child like that on the street, you would say, "Hey, get away from my child before I whoop yo," right? Bare minimum, if you couldn't get your hands on them. That's abusive, right? We would say that person, we would look to see that person, we would try to get a pin put on that person's house on that app, right? However, your child goes to school and they do the same thing, and you allow it. Your child watches these videos and they do the same thing, and you allow it. Your child is being introduced to Lil Nas X, and you allow it. Your child is being introduced to Nicki Minaj. The reason why Nicki Minaj even dressed and stuff, she done gone crazy. She on that stuff again, it seems like. So says Jay-Z. If you know about the new stuff that just came out with that, which was kind of crazy how he got back at it. But anyways, right? But she was dressing the way she was because she was trying to dress that way to make it okay for drag queens to like her. Okay, it's 11, babe. Thank you, Brother Thomas. Right? Like, she was doing that on purpose so that drag queens, that men who want to dress like women, would support her music. That's what she was telling me. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just saying. But if I laid it out like that, and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who I mentioned earlier, she was somebody who didn't even believe it. Others were telling her, Neely Fuller Jr. and others were telling her, hey, this is gonna happen. You're gonna see somebody like Young Thug wearing a dress on the front of the cover. You're gonna see him with a, what is the French umbrella called again? That's just for style mostly. Whatever that is, right? It doesn't really cover the sun, but it's just it does, but it doesn't. Whatever that is, you're gonna see him with that. You're gonna see him with a full dress, parasol. Thank you. You're gonna be with a parasol probably, right? But a parasol, a full dress. He's gonna kiss baby, not his baby. He gonna kiss baby, the rapper, the male rapper, the one that I don't know if he's still with Tony Braxton or not, but that baby, the billionaire, who was kissing up on Lil Wayne, and yet they tell you that oh no, that's something they regularly do. And they asked, what they asked Juvie, that. They said, "Would you aware of this?" He said, "I ain't never done that before." He said, "That's a them thing. That ain't they got nothing to do with me." He said, "That's baby. That ain't me." Yeah, that's baby. That ain't me. He said, "That's Weezy. That ain't me." And your children are watching these persons, by the way, kiss. You're thinking, oh, okay, that's what gang members do. And then they get older. No, that's not what gang members did. That's what who's the guy that just passed away? New York icon of rap. But we know what he was doing behind the scenes, and nobody want to say anything. A person still don't want to talk about it because he was an icon of rap. Bambaataa. He was out there messing with little boys. And they started saying this stuff 10, 15 years ago, heavy. And everybody did it, and everybody's still doing their best to protect it. By the way, look at who's protecting it too. Because all these cats was making music with them. Look who's protecting them. Look who's protecting them. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Your children are being fed. They need to occupy. See, we've allowed this stuff to happen where masculinity has been ripped apart. Femininity has been ripped apart too. Because now it's not about femininity. It's about, can't nobody tell me what to do? And it's not, once again, it's feminization. That's how Eve can be second place in a movement for your people and your stuff, talking about, I ain't no holla back girl. Get that all the way out of here. I ain't no holla back girl. Shut up. Don't speak was fine, even though y'all stole Sky and stuff too. But that was a little more your speed. But how in the world, all of a sudden overnight, did she go from don't speak and spiderwebs, right? Yeah, I'm a fan. You know, I used to listen to all that. Was listening to some of that on the road on my way up here. Right, I ain't gonna hold you. Right, but how you go from that to all of a sudden you ain't no holla back girl? Got two, three hits and living off of that for the rest of your life. I'm just saying, we done messed this thing up. And our sisters are supposed to be now hard, and they supposed to make the money. I don't need no man, and blah, blah, and this and that, or whatever. But then telling men how to be. And men is up here talking about how they don't need women, they only need them for sex objects. So both sides talking about all you need the other person for is a sex toy, and then trying to figure out why can't nobody get along. I mean, at some point, we got to realize that they done messed this up. Yeah, you need your husband? Yeah, I need my wife. Say all this stuff. I don't even want a wife. I ain't talking about one. No, I'm talking about need. Want is lack. I don't lack a wife. I need mine. I don't need I need mine. Say whatever you will about yours. Talk that trash about yours. Say this and that or whatever. I'm not saying I'm always there. I'm not saying I'm always righteous and everything she needs. I'm a human being. I have my moments, but I promise you, I need mine, right? You go ahead and talk all that trash all you want, bro. Keep that over there. For real. You sis, if you saying all that stuff and you want to teach that somewhere else. Hey, bro, teach that somewhere else. Hey, to the teenagers, I need you to understand, right? You need a husband. You need a wife. All this stuff, like little babies coming up. You need a husband. You need a wife. You need to be taught the importance of a husband and a wife. I promise you, your life is going to be better when you got a mama and a daddy, right? It's going to be better for you if you had the same mama and the same daddy. I promise you. And you know why? Because some of you can just simply ask. It's a generational curse. Ask your mama. Ask your daddy. Would you have preferred if you had both? Would you have preferred if you had mama and daddy? Ask daddy while he talking trash about mama. Stop it and say, would you have preferred it if you had mama and daddy together? My mama talking trash about daddy. Stop her one time and say, hey, mama, would you have preferred him? But yes, and both of them in the same house. Matter of fact, look, I've heard from some of y'all. I didn't grow up like that. So I don't know it personally. I'm talking about what y'all have told me. I've listened. I've sat down. I've watched persons cry and tell me that they were embarrassed because there would be daddy-daughter dates and daddy was nowhere around. Right, and so everybody else had, and so maybe uncle so-and-so, or maybe friend so-and-so, or maybe big brother could take them, but they wish that they could have been like everybody else that had that. I've seen brothers cry, talking about, look, I'm a brother who lost his mama as an adult. Not quite 20, but lost my mama as an adult. And still, to this day, be crying sometimes because she not there. Not just on Mother's Day. On certain days, it just be certain random days. So it could be a random Monday, it could be a random Tuesday, and I all of a sudden I'm like, man, I wish she was here, and I start to break down. Ask before you start talking about how you don't need this and need that. Ask your parents if they would have preferred. Matter of fact, some of them who didn't have or whatever, they had mama and daddy. They might have been a so-called single person. They might have been a so-called single person, and yet they were raised with mama and daddy. Ask them if that was great that they were raised with mama and daddy. Now, some of them, because they be talking this trash, they're gonna start hitting you with, well, actually, and blah blah. Look, if we could have had it y'all's way, where our parents, especially if they were righteous, mothers and fathers being together, you can't tell me that somebody doesn't prefer that. It just is what it is, man. So these persons who are trying to tear us apart, see these Jebusites and these Amorites and these Hittites and who else we talk about, Perizzites, et cetera, these Canaanites who were going into the promise. Don't allow, you're going to have to fight off this stuff. God's giving you the promise, and these persons are still trying to occupy. There's still camps that are left over, holdovers that you haven't been able to get rid of. It took 400 years to be able to make sure that Jerusalem, it took till King David, from Moses to David, we were fighting from Joshua to David. We were fighting to have our capital pure and clean and lawful and legal. It takes time. It takes time. But don't give up and don't give in to this stuff. Right? You're being delivered from bondage. We were taught by Kemet, and we began to envy our oppressors. I'm breaking my promise. Well, not breaking my promise. That was our last point. But this is seriously. This is something that just came from my spirit. Yesterday, we were having a conversation, and we were talking about stuff, and our elders, the persons who were a little older than myself, and I was listening, and they were starting to talk about things and starting to say, man, you know what? They made us feel bad about the things that now everybody says it is. And we hear persons say this, but to hear it from somebody who's of that generation, to where, hey, they were raised where, even if you want to call them poor, they were raised where, and I'm using their words, they were talking about, if you wanted to go ahead and you were hungry, you just went out and got some watermelon, right? So Solomon was with us, right? So he's listening to the adults have this conversation, and they're talking about stuff, and they start talking about like drinking out of the fire hose, and I start talking about, well, in New York, when I was young, we opened up the fire hydrant. We just run through and stuff. You let the bad water come out first, but then after that, you just run through the water. That you had your bathing suit on, and a lot of us, that was our swimming. I actually knew how to swim. I went to the Y from time to time, which a lot of persons didn't back then. But that was our swimming hole for us, right? But they were talking about their swimming hole. They were talking about, man, if you didn't want to come inside, if we were trying to explain, it was like, why would you drink out the fire hose? Why would you just go inside? And I was like, well, you didn't go inside. And I had to try to explain to him, yeah, son, like, if you try to go inside, your parents might say, why are you trying to come inside? right? Like, yo, you want to stay inside? Come inside. And then you would be that was your punishment back then, because you couldn't go outside and play. You didn't want to be on the game all day. If your friends was outside, I love to be on the game all day, but if my friends were like, yo, we're going to be riding bikes for 3 hours. Hey, then after that, we're going to the pool. Hey, then after that, we're doing this. I'm not going to be on the game. I'm about to do that. If you couldn't have the opportunity, if you wanted to go outside, that was a punishment back in the day, right? So we're having this conversation, but as I listen, they start talking about, once again, they said, yeah, if you were hungry, you climbed a tree. You knew where the berries were. You knew where this was. You knew where that was. You went to the bush. Hey, if people went hunting or whatever, you ate whatever they got. So if they shot a deer, that you had deer. If you know, depending on where you were, if they had squirrel, if they had rabbit, if they had whatever, you ate whatever, right? But that was stuff that was there. You had, and I'm not even saying all that stuff is lawful, legal, eating, whatever. But what I'm trying to get across to you is that you had free reign, but you were told you were poor. Then all of a sudden, persons who wanted your land started coming to your parents and started telling them, hey, your baby shouldn't go to the schools they go to, and they should learn how to live off the land. They need to go ahead and go to schools. And they started moving your people from the stuff that we owned and told us to start going to schools that hated us and started telling them to go to the projects. And some persons still grew food in the projects, depending on what kind of project you grew up in. But we ended up going to the project and left free behind, free 99 behind, right? Left nature behind. They started cutting down all the trees, cutting weeds, cutting grass, right? Taking away medicine and stuff. And then had you living in somewhere and then basically owned anything and everything that could have made you what you had. It could have made you wealthy. You were rich, but you think you were poor. See, somebody took advantage of you. You thought that you were poor, but really thou art rich. You had everything that Yah gave you, right? And somebody wanted to occupy the promise, and here it is that you decided you're going to give them the promise. Here it is that Yah said, I got this for you. You said, I'm hungry in the moment, so I'll give away the promise for a bowl of soup or for a pot of porridge. You would give up the land. You would give up the promise. That's right. Amen, babe. They made us ashamed of our life and of our land. They made us ashamed of being Native American. We would say we was Cherokee, but we really didn't want to live like Cherokee. We would say we was Navajo, but we didn't really want to be Navajo. Now we want to be Navajo, but we are so separated from it by generations, we don't know what to do. And we would have our grandparents. Our grandparents would just sneak by and tell us sometimes, hey, you know you're Navajo, but don't tell nobody. Why not? Same thing they used to say about being Israelites. There's a lot of persons that grew up and somebody would tell them, you know you're Israelite, right? Right? You know you Muskogee Creek. Praise Yah that they getting their stuff back. Praise Yah. I'm just saying, you got to recognize this. There's somebody who's occupying what Yah promised you to be. Why would you let them keep occupying it? Be who Yah told you to be. It's time for us to go back and touch earth. It's time for us to go back and be obedient to the one who made heaven and earth. It's time for us to be obedient and stop being what everybody else tells us to be. Because obedience is better than sacrifice. Doesn't matter how much you sacrifice. If you won't obey, it ain't going nowhere. Because if you don't sacrifice to the one you're obedient to, you're not sacrificing to him anyways. You're sacrificing to idols. All right, I'm done for real. Thank y'all so much. We're going to do a quick shout out if you'd like to join us on TikTok for it. If you're not on TikTok, thank you for being on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok today. We appreciate you. We will be on live this evening. I will be on live tomorrow in the Rising, but I will not be on live tomorrow evening. I will not be on live at all on Wednesday. So we have this evening, tomorrow. I will not be on live at all. There will be no meeting at all on Tuesday evening. There will be nothing at all on Wednesday. I'm going to go sit down somewhere on Wednesday. I'm going to enjoy my family. I'm going to just, ride whatever we do in that day. I'm just going to chill. And then Thursday, Friday, we'll be back for Q&A. Thursday, ministerial staff is the first Thursday of the month. So we're going to have our meeting. And Friday evening, women's meeting. Saturday evening, men's meeting. We're on point number 9. And we look forward to seeing you all then. And thank you so much for being on. Very much so appreciate you all one more again. I'm thankful and grateful to have an opportunity to be able to speak with you. Rest well, rest in Yah. Thank you for everybody that helped out with everything in Pentecost. Thank you for everybody who's hosted us in any way, shape, or form in Detroit. You guys have made this a very enjoyable experience for everybody in my family. And hopefully we were able to do something that made it the same for you. Thank you for everybody that's been with us virtually throughout this trip as well. And we're looking forward to continuing to do great things. Remember, as we said, this is not just virtual, it's reality. We have a way of being able to stay in contact and stay in communication with everyone around us. The choice is ours, right? All right, much love. Thank you again to everybody. We appreciate you. We give our honor and praise to the Most High Yah. We give our praise and honor to him for my wife, the Honorable Amma. And to everybody, lottie-dottie, everybody, love. We love you with the love of Yah. Remember, as always, beloved, that you are loved. You are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. All right, shalom, family. Take care. Thank you again to everybody who came over from Early Riser Bible Study session as well. We appreciate you. All right, we'll see you later this evening. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for that. We appreciate you. We're going to do the shout out over here on TikTok. Y'all have a great day.